LoveLore Library. Chapter 589. Wei Wei Bai's brain rang. When she met with a scumbag fighter, her scumbag body automatically resisted. Those who looked like scumbags were nothing at all. Only this kind of appearance was graceful and elegant, with a pair of eyes that were filled with electricity. He would attract and flirt with anyone he saw. He was the real scumbag. Wei Wei Bai felt that how could she be at a disadvantage? When she thought of doing a belly dance with the system naked, her emotions were about to explode. Wei Wei Bai restrained her expression and looked at He Dongling in a daze. He Dongling was still using his charm and asked gently, "What's wrong, Wei Wei? You were scared." "I'm fine." Bai Wei Wei's eyelashes trembled, and a teardrop fell without warning. She hurriedly lowered her head and her thin shoulders couldn't help but tremble. The pen in her hand also trembled. Wei Wei Bai lowered her head and looked at the signature on the divorce agreement. It was He Dongling's personal signature. She forced a smile. "Dongling, I know everything." He Dongling's smile didn't change. "Know what?" Wei Wei Bai seemed to be in a sorry state compared to his calmness. "I know everything." You. He Dongling's eyes were gentle as he stared at her, as if encouraging her to continue speaking. Bai Wei Wei suddenly sobbed. She bit her lip in embarrassment, and her eyes turned red. It was actually so difficult to say the word cheat. It was just like how his affectionate gaze made her think that she was still loved. He Nanshi stood at the side. Ever since his brother woke up, he had been clenching his jaw and crossing his arms in front of his chest. Then, he leaned against the wall and lowered his eyes as cold as ice. He slowly looked up. In his beautiful eyes, there was only Wei Wei Bai's weak and sorry state. And his brother's seemingly gentle, but in fact, it was a smug threat. He Nanshi's fingers dug into his palms so hard that it was about to bleed. But he didn't feel any pain at all. In his eyes, there was only her fragile figure that had retreated to compromise. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 60. You cheated. This sentence was cold, unyielding, and full of condemnation. Only then did Wei Wei Bai realize that He Nanshi had already walked to her side. He reached out to hold her hand tightly and pressed it down. The tip of the pen then landed on the divorce agreement. "Sister-in-law, I saw my brother sign this divorce agreement with my own eyes. He's not good at anything else, but he's been good at lying since he was young. He looks gentle, but he's a beast in human clothing. Don't be fooled by him." He Dongling's smile was a little stiff. Was this little brother picked up from the streets? How could he say that about his brother? Wei Wei Bai's fingers were weak. She looked down at the pen and suddenly looked up at He Dongling. Her eyes seemed to be filled with tenderness and cold pain, intertwining into a complicated yet impactful look as she looked at He Dongling. He Dongling's back was numb from the look in her eyes. Her voice was a little hoarse. "Dongling, the person you love found me. She said that I'm just a substitute." At this point, Wei Wei Bai suddenly laughed bitterly at herself. "No, I'm not even as good as a substitute. I'm just a woman you married to be a target. Because the woman you like is your father's lover." He Dongling didn't feel embarrassed at being exposed at all. Instead, he said casually, "Wei Wei, how could I do this to you? You know that I'm handsome and rich. There are always people slandering me. Don't believe the words of other women." He was indeed the king of trash fighters. Damn, he even had the face to say such things. Save button there. Chapter 590. Wei Wei Bai suddenly felt that her skin was not thick enough compared to this person in front of her. She decided that she had to be thicker by another 3 feet. Wei Wei Bai almost couldn't maintain her smile. She looked up at him deeply, as if she was meeting this man for the first time. It was unfamiliar and scrutinizing. It was as if there was a pain that went deep into her bones. This gaze could make one's heart clench. She finally couldn't hold it in anymore and laughed softly. "Can you stop lying to me? I can't take it. You know me. No one has loved me since I was young. I lack love. It doesn't matter if you can cheat me of my money or my body, but. Wei Wei Bai gritted her teeth and almost cried out. "Don't lie to me about my feelings. I only have this little bit of extravagant hope for love left. You have to dig it out while I'm still alive." He Dongling's smile froze. He pursed his lips and suddenly couldn't say the sweet words that he had always casually said. After hurting someone, he had always left as soon as he said so. But this was the first time that someone had laid out such bloody wounds in front of him. She even begged him to stop lying to her. Wei Wei Bai reached out to support her forehead, as if she couldn't bear the burden. Her fingers that were holding the pen moved. "Nanshi, let go of your hand." Nanshi stood behind her and didn't move. His fingers were so stiff that he didn't even know how to release them. Wei Wei Bai struggled to break free from his fingers little by little. Then, without anyone's help, she slowly and firmly signed her name on the divorce agreement. When the name was announced, the crowd was stunned. Nanshi didn't know what happened, but the strength in his body was suddenly drawn out. There was no feeling of joy, only heartache. His heartache for her was overwhelming. Wei Wei Bai picked up the agreement and wiped her eyes with her fingers. Her tone calmed down. "Your parents have already escaped abroad, and your little lover is still here. Your family is no longer an obstacle to you." She took the agreement and walked in front of Dongling. His pale face had a firm and calm expression. Wei Wei Bai said, "The only obstacle now is me." After she finished speaking, she revealed a relieved and tired smile. "This is for you. Congratulations, you can finally pursue your true love." After saying that, Wei Wei Bai threw the agreement in his face. Dongling hissed. His face was in pain. Wei Wei Bai looked at him expressionlessly and said, Dongling and Wei Wei Bai have nothing to do with each other from now on." After she finished speaking, she glanced at him indifferently without a trace of the tenderness she had in the past. She had also lost the warmth of joy from seeing him. Then she turned around and left without hesitation. Dongling held the divorce agreement in his hand. His mind was still in a daze as he watched her leave. Was this Wei Wei Bai? She was the one who liked him so much that she could endure any kind of bullying, even if he forced her to drink with him. She didn't want to leave and was only willing to like that idiot. Nanshi, who had already chased after her, suddenly stopped in his tracks. His face was cold and his eyes were dark. He was like an unsheathed knife as he suddenly turned around. He rushed in front of Dongling and raised his long leg. It was a standard taekwondo kick, but he stopped in midair. The shoe was less than 2 centimeters away from Dongling's shocked face. Dongling froze. "Nanshi, what are you doing?" Nanshi pursed his lips. His exquisite face was terrifyingly sharp. "If you hadn't just woken up, would have kicked you." Chapter 591. He was afraid that he would kick his scumbag brother into a vegetative state again. He was being merciful because of their brotherhood. Nanshi stopped after he finished speaking and picked up the divorce agreement. "I'll go to the Civil Affairs Bureau to settle the divorce for you." Since both parties had signed the agreement, the divorce was effective. All that was left was to go to the Civil Affairs Bureau to settle the rest of the matters. Nanshi took care of it himself. His eyes were cold. "Brother, from now on, you and sister-in-law have nothing to do with each other." With that, he ignored Dongling's strange expression and chased after her. Wei Wei Bai was gone. Nanshi panicked, worried that she had done something stupid. He put on his mask again and searched for her in the crowded hospital. When he finally reached the entrance of the hospital, he realized that she had already walked out of the hospital. Hinanshi immediately ran forward and grabbed her arm. He moved his lips, but the words "sister-in-law" came out of his mouth. Wei Wei. Wei Wei Bai froze and turned around in a daze. She was not as calm as before. She looked like she would collapse at any moment. Being betrayed by her own husband and being used as a shield from the beginning was a fatal blow to any woman. When she saw that it was Hinanshi, she straightened her back and forced herself to be more alert. Nanshi, I'm not your sister-in-law anymore. I'll move out of the house. You, Hinanshi said coldly, why do you want to move out? You don't have to move. Wei Wei Bai frowned. But, Hinanshi interrupted her. No buts. How can we split the couple's assets? Are you stupid? Half of the house is yours. Wei Wei Bai, isn't the house a prenuptial asset? Hinanshi was afraid that she would move out and not even want him anymore. He could only desperately find an excuse. My brother cheated on you. According to the law, he's the one at fault. You're the one who left the family with nothing. Part of his private assets under his name was given to that little bitch, but the majority of his assets that haven't been converted into cash are still there. Wei Wei Bai, so... Hinanshi's eyes were full of calculation. He cheated and made mistakes. He's a scumbag, but he didn't do anything wrong with his money. You can't miss a single cent of what you deserve. Wei Wei Bai felt that all her lines had been snatched away. She tried her best to salvage the situation. I think, Hinanshi narrowed his eyes. Yes, I think half of the property is not enough. After all, my brother is the one at fault. You should get more than half of the house. It's only fair that I give you all of it. Wei Wei Bai, does your brother know that you're scheming against him? She looked like she was still going to leave. Hinanshi's voice suddenly softened. He lowered his eyes, and the calmness in his eyes shattered, revealing a trace of pleading. So, the house is yours. If my brother comes, you can chase him away. And if you find me an eyesore, you can chase me away. Don't leave. The words "don't leave" were filled with a weak panic. Wei Wei Bai looked at him silently. He was a little nervous, afraid that she would notice something. In the end, she just smiled. Nanshi, you're so good to me. Hinanshi felt so sorry for her that he didn't know what to do. Wei Wei Bai suddenly reached out and gently placed her hand on his chest. Can you hug me? Hinanshi hesitated for a moment. Without waiting for her reaction, he had already reached out and gently pulled her into his arms. Wei Wei Bai quietly leaned on his chest. She held it in, but in the end, she couldn't hold on anymore. She buried her face in his chest and silently soaked his clothes with her tears. Hinanshi's fingers clenched tightly. In the end, he raised his hand and placed it on her back to comfort her. He didn't dare to disturb her, but he was full of strength. His lips moved silently. Don't cry, I'm here. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 65. // save button. Chapter 592. After Wei Wei Bai cried, Hinanshi led her home. Hinanshi tried to brainwash her, this is your home, you don't have to go anywhere. The lawyer has been hired, and he'll give you the property in minutes. You have to take it, or else you'll be an idiot. You've been an idiot once, don't be an idiot a second time. Wei Wei Bai sighed, Nanshi, you're like an angel sent by the heavens to save me. Hinanshi smiled, as long as you're happy, I can do anything. Wei Wei Bai thought, this is too easy, his favorability can increase at any time. She asked the system, what's the favorability of that scumbag? The system, 10. Wei Wei Bai said, facing his wife who worked so hard for him, his favorability is so low. He's indeed an extraordinary scumbag. The system, the initial favorability was 5, the remaining 5 points increased when you were crying about the divorce. Wei Wei Bai said, sigh, scumbags always have the same trick. When you don't love him, he'll feel that it's rare. She thought about it, and decided to postpone her flirting with Hinanshi. She was worried that if she filled up the favorability, that scumbag's favorability would not increase. She would have to belly dance naked. At that time, no matter how thick-skinned she was, it would be useless. It would be too embarrassing. She could not do it. After Hinanshi returned home, he excitedly led Wei Wei Bai to the music room. I composed a few more songs, I'll play them for you. Wei Wei Bai could almost see the titles of the songs floating in front of her eyes. My sister-in-law who's like a loving mother, a mother's love is a mountain, not my real mother is better than my real mother, ah, my love for you is like the yellow river from heaven, Wei Wei Bai thought, no, I don't want to listen, get lost. Hinanshi's slender fingers gently opened the lid of the piano. He sat down gracefully. Then he began to play the music he had composed. Each and every song was gentle and affectionate. As Wei Wei Bai listened, she felt as if she had returned to her mother's womb. She really wanted to sleep. The notes under Hinanshi's fingers had no lyrics, but they were more vivid than lyrics. It was gentle like water, unlike his previous impactful songs. These songs were more like going through the bustling world of mortals, going through war, and finally turning into the purest love. Playing for only one person. His gaze softened, and he couldn't help but hum a few lines. His voice was sexy and hoarse, but it was clear like spring water that entered one's heart. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but soften her expression. She began to hum softly. She had the voice of a movie queen. It was sweet but not greasy. It had a unique sense of space and was a perfect match for Hinanshi's voice. The windows of the music room were glass. Sunlight streamed in. She was shrouded in a halo of light, blurring her gentle and beautiful face. Her faint and ethereal singing voice was heard. Hinanshi's fingers paused. He suddenly felt that she was the angel who had been sent to save him from the dark swamp. Wei Wei Bai heard the music stop and couldn't help but smile. It's very nice, Nanshi. Hinanshi lowered his head and said unnaturally, it's because you sing well. He had never thought that his song would come out of her mouth. It was like the sound of nature. Wei Wei Bai didn't seem to take his praise to heart. Instead, she looked at him with a gentle gaze. Nanshi, have you ever thought of returning to the stage? Hinanshi was stunned. His fingers landed on the piano keys, making a dong sound. Wei Wei Bai smiled. Actually, I just think that you would be very dazzling on the stage. // Chapter 593. Hinanshi's heartbeat sped up. His fingers trembled and he looked up uncertainly. Really? Wei Wei Bai looked at him and nodded lightly. Really, have you forgotten? I'm your fan. When I first liked you, it was because of how you were on stage. When she liked him, Hinanshi's breathing slowed down, but his heartbeat kept getting louder and louder. In the end, he didn't know what to do. He lowered his head, and his ears were red. Then I'll try. He hadn't been online for a long time, and he was afraid that he would see an overwhelming amount of black material. He was also worried that he would see his former fans become anti-fans and scold him. But these negative feelings were crushed when she lightly said, I'm your fan. For the first time, Hinanshi felt that it didn't matter if the whole world scolded him. As long as she was the only one who liked him. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 70. Wei Wei Bai, it was too easy to flirt with. The system also reminded her, this side mission is completed with the completion of the main mission. If the male lead's favorability is 100 and he dongling's favorability is less than 90, we will have to belly dance naked. Wei bye. Can you stop reminding me about the belly dance? Just hearing it made her feel ashamed. If she really failed and had to dance, she didn't need to transmigrate. She would just find a thread to hang herself. In the following time, Wei Bai carefully didn't dare to flirt with Hinanshi. Hinanshi was young and didn't have enough willpower. He wasn't as experienced as his slag brother. She just casually tricked him and he impulsively increased his favorability. Hinanshi guarded Wei Bai for a day until she fell asleep. He made sure that she didn't run away before he went back to his room. He laid on the bed for a while, staring at the ceiling in a daze. Finally, he made up his mind. Hinanshi made a phone call to one of the most famous agents in the circle. Hello. I'm Hinanshi. What's the matter? Hinanshi hesitated for a moment. Do you still have the contract that you poached me for? The manager said, you're planning to make a comeback. Have you thought it through? Your family has offended someone. If you make a comeback, you'll face a lot of resistance. Hinanshi, I know you can. The agent, although you're a good seedling and a genius, are you worth the risk? Hinanshi sent over a few of his new songs. The most famous agent in the industry was silent for an hour before calling him again. I've signed you. These songs, are you in a relationship? Hinanshi smiled sweetly. Not really. At most, it's a crush. When he reappeared on the stage and reappeared the glory of the past, dazzling and beautiful. He would bend and humbly beg for her love. He hoped that at that time, she would be willing to hug him. Wei Bai sneezed in the middle of her sleep. Who missed her? Wei Bai rubbed her nose. She had a flash of inspiration. Slagstem, is there any medicine that can paralyze Hedongling? The system, paralysis. Wei Bai, no, paralysis is too hard to serve. Let's make it half paralysis. The system had no choice but to go to the shop. There's a late-night discount. 30 days of paralysis pills, 10 days of life points. Wei Bai felt the pinch for a long time before saying hesitantly, let's buy it. The system clicked to buy it. Are you giving this to Hedongling to take revenge on him? Wei Bai, who would waste their precious life points to take revenge on a scumbag? Do you know what makes a scumbag suffer the most? The download text is at https://www.sashu.com // to make it easier for you to read it next time. You can click the button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 594. System, what? Bai Weiwei revealed a beautiful smile. Of course it's when he's miserably abandoned by everyone, and finds out that his ex-wife, who he didn't want, is living better than him. Hedongling sneezed in his sleep in the hospital. Why did it feel like someone was cursing him? He woke up the next day and realized that he was paralyzed. Hedongling was silent for a long time and looked between his legs. Paralysis was one thing, but he couldn't not lift it. After confirming that he could lift it, he lay back on the bed tiredly. He listened to the doctor's professional jargon and understood it, but without his legs, he would really be disabled in the future. He picked up the phone and called Hu Lijing. Hello. Hedongling revealed a gentle smile. Dear, I'm awake. Hu Lijing hesitated for a moment. Dongling. Hedongling smiled and said, yes. Hu Lijing, I heard that you're paralyzed. Hedongling, who told you that? How did the news spread so quickly? His tone was even gentler. Although I'm paralyzed, the important parts aren't. Hu Lijing hesitated and finally said, Dongling, I just found out that the person the He family offended was actually Ninth Master. I can't afford to offend him. He Dongling's smile turned cold. So, you're leaving me? Hu Lijing smiled unnaturally. Why are you saying it in such a scary way? Your eyes are so attractive, but we all know that you like to play with relationships that end peacefully. He Dongling couldn't refute that. He liked a woman every time, but it came and went quickly. As for Hu Lijing, his feelings were still fresh. He hadn't said anything about breaking up, but she said it first. Hu Lijing said, I know that the He family offended someone they shouldn't have, but I didn't know that it was Ninth Master. He's not someone to be trifled with. I'm worried that I'll be implicated, so let's part peacefully. He Dongling's eyes were terrifyingly cold, without any of his usual gentleness. He said softly, Fine, I'm tired of playing with you anyway. Hu Lijing laughed out loud. Me too. I'm tired of cheating games. Goodbye then. Thank you for the jewelry and house. Let's meet again. He Dongling hung up the phone. After enduring for a while, he finally couldn't take it anymore and threw the phone in his hand. He had always been the one dumping people, but now, he was being dumped by a woman. No, there was one more. Only then did he remember Wei Wei Bai's divorce agreement. She rejected him as well. But unlike Hu Lijing, her rejection was much more forceful and heartbreaking. He could even see how she tore apart her feelings bit by bit. Destruction was for him to see. He Dongling didn't know why, but he couldn't help but recall the look in her eyes that day. It was full of unwavering determination. He Dongling felt a little uncomfortable. He asked someone to bring him a laptop phone. No, he couldn't bear it. She needed someone to suffer with her. Then, he started to freeze Hu Lijing's bank account. As for the property he gave Hu Lijing, he was sorry. He contacted the person who transferred the property at that time. Yes, he got it back. The most expensive jewelry he gave Hu Lijing was paid in installments. He wasn't paying anymore. Goodbye. As for the bags and clothes he bought, he would just give them to her as an overnight fee. He Dongling always had a backup plan. He had been terrifyingly rational since he was young. His parents' feelings for his younger brother couldn't affect him. When he grew up, with a pair of affectionate eyes and a good family background, he had always been successful. Loving someone didn't last long. Chapter 595. Liking something for less than 3 months. He did not care how miserable others were, he only cared about his own happiness. After he woke up, he realized that the He family had offended someone they should not have offended and was forced to such a state. Although he still had some money on hand, he would have to spend it sparingly in the future. He had to take back what he had given away. Oh right, when Wei Wei Bai got divorced, did she get any assets? Giving her a few $100,000 should be enough for this poor woman to be happy. He Dongling thought coldly. Then he tried to move his leg, but he could not feel anything. Damn, was he really crippled? Wei Wei Bai sent an anonymous message to Hu Lijing. As expected, when Hu Lijing found out that the He family had offended Sire Jiu, she was so scared that she immediately ran away. In fact, when Wei Wei Bai saw the information, she was so scared that she wanted to run away too. Because this Sire Jiu, an old man in his 60s, had great power and all kinds of magical experiences. Although the He family was powerful, they were not enough in front of him. He was completely crushed. He was the invisible boss of this world. And because this big brother was in a high position, he was thinking about hobbies in his old age every day. In his old age, he liked to raise flowers, birds, and so on. He liked to torture people. And he liked to torture handsome men and beautiful women. It was as if he felt that he was old and ugly, so he did not like young and beautiful people. He could not pass the time without torturing them. It was common to see people being crushed. Casually hanging, beating, and pouring cement on people were all trivial matters. What Qing dynasty's 10 great tortures, he would give people one from time to time. Or he would use a fire rod, or roast human flesh or something. Wei Wei Bai finished reading the information. Is this the ancient times, or the primitive era? Is this not the modern era? A society ruled by law. The system said, the Qing dynasty's 10 great tortures and fire roasting human flesh are all rumors, but he liked to torture people. The emptiness and loneliness in his old age are real. Pouring cement is also a big fun for him. Wei Wei Bai felt that with this master. No matter how strong the love was, it would be destroyed. So she silently sent a message to Hu Lijing. Sure enough, He Dongling broke up with Hu Lijing. Wei Wei Bai felt that it wasn't worth it for the original owner. He Dongling, this guy, wouldn't be moved at all. Even if he had to take a huge risk and marry her as a cover. He Dongling was just being impulsive. Whether it was his love or Hu Lijing's love, it was only temporary. The original owner, an innocent person, was tormented. After dealing with Hu Lijing, Wei Wei Bai started to call for a nurse. Look for nannies who have abused their masters. The crueler the better. She wanted He Dongling to feel the warmth of love. She had to let him know what the harsh reality was. When He Nanshi woke up, he received a call from his agent. I started to help you clear your name. I've already talked to Ninth Master. The Internet Water Army won't do anything to you anymore. I'll help you take over your Weibo and QQ. Prepare to make a comeback. He Nanshi nodded solemnly. Thank you. Agent, you're welcome. We each take what we need. My company doesn't have any good seedlings to replace me recently. You can come at the right time to cheer up the weak singing circle. He Nanshi told him a bunch of plans for the future. When he was done, he finally heaved a sigh of relief and hung up the phone. Things went smoother than expected. He bet that the He family had already collapsed. Ninth Master's anger towards his parents for offending him had subsided after he punished them. And the power behind this agent was especially powerful. He could get in touch with Ninth Master and help him plead for mercy. But in the future, he wouldn't be as free as he was now. After signing with this company and following this agent who only looked at value, busyness became the main theme of his life. But for her, it was all worth it. Chapter 596. He Nanshi walked out. As he had not slept the entire night, his complexion was not good, but his eyes were very bright. Wei Wei Bai was putting on her shoes and getting ready to go out. He Nanshi quickly walked over. Wei Wei, where are you going? Wei Wei Bai corrected him. Call me sister, I'm older than you. He Nanshi muttered, just a year and a half older, that's not that much older. If Wei Wei Bai did not speak in such an old-fashioned manner, she would look so delicate. Standing next to him, she was simply youthful and beautiful. Compared to his brother, who was a sly old fox, they were a much better match. Wei Wei Bai said, I'm going to look for a job. He Nanshi became nervous. What job are you looking for? You're not allowed to go to the bar anymore. Wei Wei Bai smiled. I won't go, but I can't always stay at home. Look at how much weight I've put on. If I let you take care of me, I'll become a pig. He Nanshi was a little hesitant, his beautiful eyes fixed on her. He blinked, then lowered his head and said softly, I'm going to start afresh. Wei Wei Bai, ? Seeing that she did not understand, He Nanshi pursed his thin lips and said again, I'll stand on the stage again. Wei Wei Bai's eyes lit up, revealing a surprised smile. Really? Nanshi. But soon, she showed a worried expression. But those people on the internet, Hinanshi immediately said, "Those words come and go quickly. I'll clear my name soon. Even if people slander me, I'm not afraid. Who hasn't gone through storms to become a superstar?" Wei Wei Bai looked at him with relief, her smile gentle. "You've grown up, Nanshi." "Hinanshi, why do I feel like I'm my mother?" Wei Wei Bai's smile became even more benevolent. "Don't let your favorability increase so easily. I don't want to dance naked." Hinanshi suddenly stretched out his hands and placed them on Wei Wei Bai's thin shoulders. Then, he lowered his head and gently kissed her forehead. Wei Wei Bai was caught off guard for a moment and was stunned. Hinanshi felt that she finally didn't have a motherly smile like this. Feeling a little better, he said, "This is the kiss of blessing that I will strive for. You are my sister. My glory is all yours." These words sounded awkward. However, Hinanshi did not dare to openly express his love. After all, with his big brother as an obstacle, she would definitely not agree to his request. Even though they were divorced, the He family had already hurt her. Only when he returned to the stage and stood in his former position would he change his words. Hinanshi saw the doubt in her eyes and smiled. "So, as the future superstar sister, you don't need to work." He had been laying the groundwork for so long just so that she would not go out to work. Wei Wei Bai was obviously relieved. "It's okay. I actually found a job as a caregiver. I won't go back to the bar. I'm used to being busy. It's uncomfortable to stay at home all day with nothing to do." Hinanshi thought about it and could only reluctantly nod. "If you're tired, you can stop. You have money. You don't need to work." He was the one who opened her account. The money in it was all from his brother. He had also selfishly deposited more than half of his own money. Wei Wei Bai's smile deepened. She said gently, "Lower your head." Hinanshi was very obedient and lowered his head without thinking much. She had already tiptoed and raised her head to kiss his forehead. The strands of hair on his forehead gently slid past her lips. Hinanshi did not dare to move. Her soft lips had a faint fragrance. // save button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 597. He longed to keep this petal-like kiss for more time. Wei Wei Bai left him and said with a smile, "This is a blessing kiss from Big Sister. You will definitely be able to return to the stage, Nanshi." Hinanshi's ears turned red and his cheeks also turned red. He looked away and put his hands in his pockets. With great difficulty, he snorted, I will." Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 75. Wei Wei Bai, why do I have to flirt? Why can't I control my flirting actions? I really want to chop off my hands. After Hinanshi left, Wei Wei Bai's face darkened. No, I have to quickly put that scum on the agenda. How is he doing? The system also had a common enemy. Yes, we have to quickly raise that scum's favorability. Dancing around naked, it was enough for the host to do it, but she had to drag it in. The system dutifully reported the situation on He Dongling's side. He Dongling's money was taken away by Hinanshi. Hu Lijing's little lover knew that he was paralyzed and had offended Zhou Yi, so she also waved goodbye. The new caregiver was a psychopath who liked to abuse the rich people who hired him the most. But he was careful in the beginning and didn't reveal any clues. But He Dongling was dissatisfied with the male caregiver, so he turned around and contacted the housekeeping center, planning to hire a new caregiver. Now He Dongling was in a state of uncertainty, at the bottom of his life, and doubting himself. Wei Wei Bai thought for a while before calling the housekeeping center. She planned to use the housekeeping center to let herself replace the caregiver, planning to give that scum the love of his ex-wife. She wore long sleeves and shorts, with her ponytail tied into a bun, and no makeup on her face. Then she looked in the mirror and did some eye exercises. When she opened her eyes were bright, with a trace of vitality that had long disappeared from this body. Even as a caregiver, she could see a strong and beautiful appearance full of hope for the future. And he Dongling. He was a remarried old man who was at the end of his rope, paralyzed and unwanted. Wei Wei Bai expressed that if it wasn't for the sake of the favorable impression mission, she really wanted to kick him up into the sky to prevent him from polluting Earth. When he went to the hospital to replace the male caregiver, the system suddenly said, that perverted male caregiver seems to know that he's about to be replaced. He's about to take action. Wei Wei Bai said, let's go quickly, or he Dongling will be tortured to death. He Dongling was in a very bad mood. With a gloomy expression, he said to the nurse, push me out. The male caregiver smiled amiably. Yes, sir. Then he pushed the wheelchair and walked out. The sun shone brightly, but for he Dongling, whose legs were crippled, everything was meaningless. The He family had been suppressed to such an extent that they had offended Ninth Master. Even if the He family had the connections and power to make a comeback, they didn't dare to make a move. Because Master Zhou didn't say anything, if his parents dared to come back from abroad. Then, Master Nine would directly drown his parents in cement and drown them in the sea. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have instigated his father to snatch resources from Master Zhou. He thought that the He family already had the power to fight that perverted old man. He didn't expect that the old man's real strength was so powerful that the He family couldn't compete with him at all. He Dongling stared fiercely at his legs. How did they become crippled? He was now a cripple. It was easier said than done for him to start afresh. Suddenly, He Dongling looked up. Why was the wheelchair getting more and more remote? He frowned and didn't think much for a moment. Let's go back, I'm tired. Chapter 598. But the caregiver continued to push him forward as if he didn't hear anything. He Dongling's heart tightened, but he said calmly, let's go back. The caregiver finally pushed him to a place where there was no one else. His face became ferocious. Do you know? Why did I become a caregiver? He Dongling felt that something was wrong. He turned around and was flipped over. The caregiver overturned the wheelchair and stepped on He Dongling's calf with one foot. He Dongling didn't feel any pain because his lower limbs were paralyzed. Even if he felt pain, it wouldn't reach his brain. But he still instinctively flinched. The caregiver saw him struggling on the ground. He laughed sinisterly. I was bullied when I was poor. When my mother died, I couldn't even afford the surgery fee of 10,000 yuan. But what about you? You're staying in a VIP ward with a bunch of doctors and nurses waiting on you. Why? He Dongling, so what if you're rich? What does it matter to me if you're poor? Of course, he calmed down quickly and was careful not to provoke this caregiver who was obviously mentally ill. Actually, I don't have much money left. I'm bankrupt and will be kicked out of the hospital soon. He analyzed this caregiver in a second. He hated the rich. The caregiver kicked him in the stomach. He Dongling felt that his internal organs were about to shift. His face turned pale and he coughed desperately. The caregiver roared, "Do you think I'm stupid? I heard you calling to change caregivers. Do you think you can afford to change caregivers but not stay in the hospital? This society is so ugly because of the existence of scum like you. I came here to kill you all." He Dongling felt that he was unlucky. Not only would he get into a car accident and become disabled, but he would also meet perverts after becoming disabled. The perverted caregiver dug out a handful of soil and was about to stuff it into He Dongling's mouth. Aren't you very rich? You've never eaten soil before, right? I'll let you have a taste. He Dongling finally couldn't take it anymore. He shook his head desperately and the soil was pressed on his face. Although he didn't get to eat it, he felt extremely humiliated. The caregiver saw his face covered in dirt and laughed out loud. In the past, those who were paralyzed in bed couldn't speak, so they couldn't expose me. This is the first time I've done anything to a rich person like you. He Dongling's face paled. What are you doing? The caregiver dragged him. There's a small slope in front of us. If I throw you down, there will be big rocks below. I think you'll hit your head when you go down. He Dongling grabbed the ground with all his might. Let me go. I'll give you money. I still have a lot of money. I'll give you as much as you want. The caregiver said, so what if you're rich? What I want is dignity. He Dongling hurriedly said, if you want dignity, I can give you money. If I give you a lot of money, no one will look down on you. The caregiver roared angrily, trash like you don't understand at all. Some things can't be bought with money. Family, love, and friendship can't be bought with money. He Dongling, meeting a pervert, I don't feel good. The caregiver dragged him to the slope. After you go down, I think your whole body will be paralyzed. I'll use a rock to stab you in the head. You can only lie on the bed obediently and let me serve you. He Dongling struggled until his eyes were red. His fingers dug into the ground so hard that his skin was bleeding. He was frightened and angry. You better let go of me. Otherwise, when I get out, I'll make you suffer. Chapter 599. The caregiver sneered. My lowly life can be exchanged for your life. It's worth it. After saying that, he was about to push him down. The caregiver had just used his strength when his body suddenly shook. A rock had hit him on the head. He Dongling was on the verge of despair, but the strength that was pulling him was gone. He suddenly looked up. A pair of thin, straight, and fair calves appeared in his bloodshot eyes. Then that pair of legs squatted down. A familiar yet unfamiliar face appeared. Her eyes seemed to be filled with sunlight, and there was a kind of vitality in them. He Dongling, are you okay? He Dongling's desperate heart relaxed. Wei Wei. Wei Wei Bai glanced at the caregiver who had been knocked out by her and frowned. If I hadn't happened to pass by, you would have died. After saying that, she didn't care about He Dongling's sorry state. She reached under his armpits and dragged him to the wheelchair. After putting him in the wheelchair with difficulty, she quickly pushed him and said, I already called the police, but when I saw that you were about to be pushed down, I could only knock him out with a rock. He Dongling's lips moved. He felt that Wei Wei Bai's state was unexpected. After losing him and divorcing him, shouldn't she be dispirited and haggard? Why did she look so lively and full of life, like a fresh and tender grass that had just sprouted? He struggled to open his mouth and finally said, I thought you couldn't wait for me to die. Wei Wei Bai paused in her steps. After a moment of silence, she said, Am I such a bad person in your eyes? He Dongling was choked by her words. Wei Wei Bai laughed. That's true. I'm poor and have a lowly job. It's only right that you play with me. I actually hoped that you would understand me. He Dongling had just experienced a life and death situation. He couldn't say a single word of the coaxing lies in his mind. He frowned. His face was covered in dirt, and he didn't have the slightest bit of his usual carefree and dignified appearance. I didn't think of you that way. Besides, you used to be very pretty. You weren't that unbearable. Wei Wei Bai's smile twitched. Are you saying that I'm not pretty now? It was rare for He Dongling to be embarrassed. He was actually blocked by her words. He felt that his mind was in a mess. His fingers gripped the armrest of the wheelchair. You're much better than before. She didn't put on makeup, nor did she look at him with adoration. However, she was much more dazzling, as if even her temperament had changed. It brought him a lot of novelty. Wei Wei Bai calmly said, because the beautiful one from before is dead, and I'm the only one left. He Dongling was pricked by her words and felt a slight pain. This was the first time a woman had told him this in person. He did something wrong to her, and she died once. In the past, he would leave after he was done. Wei Wei Bai was also having an affair with Hu Lijing at that time. He just happened to need a wife to deal with his family. In addition, she might have a rebellious heart and love to play, so he married her. However, after marrying her, he felt that she wasn't presentable. Also, he felt that she was a little dirty in various aspects of her career. He couldn't be bothered to touch her. He was indeed a scumbag, but he was a scumbag with a clear conscience and no burden at all. However, Wei Wei Bai was the first woman to make him feel a psychological burden. Wei Wei Bai pushed He Dongling to the hospital for a checkup. The police also came and arrested that perverted caregiver. Wei Wei Bai waited until He Dongling came out of the checkup and said to him, "Since you're fine, I'll be leaving." Chapter 600. He Dongling glanced at the tag on her clothes. "You're a nurse." Wei Wei Bai glanced at the tag on her chest nonchalantly. "Because I'm not a hostess anymore, I'm a nurse. With my education, I can't find a good job." These words were really blunt. Each sentence was meant to stab him. He Dongling curled his lips. "Don't tell me you're my nurse." Wei Wei Bai was extremely calm. "Yes, I didn't know that I was going to be your nurse, and I didn't know that there was something wrong with your leg." He Dongling clenched his fingers and tightened them. His leg was paralyzed. He would be a cripple in the future. He glanced at the youthful and bright Wei Wei Bai and suddenly felt that it was a little dazzling. Even if she was a nurse, he was a cripple who needed someone to serve him. In front of her, he wasn't much stronger. He Dongling smiled. "After the divorce, you can still get some money. I can give it to you, so you don't have to be a nurse anymore." Wei Wei Bai also smiled. "You're so generous." He Dongling, why does it feel like sarcasm? Wei Wei Bai said again, "Nanshi said that you've already given me a large sum of money and asked me to keep it. I didn't expect you to continue giving me money." He Dongling was dumbfounded. When did he give her money? He Dongling's face darkened. "Wait for me." Then he pushed his wheelchair to find his laptop, opened his account, and looked for his property list. He made a few more phone calls. He found that Nanshi's cheap brother had actually transferred more than half of his money. And on the grounds of divorce, he had transferred it to Wei Wei Bai. The law even supported it because it was a joint property of the couple. Even the name of the house had been changed because he was the wrong party. The lawyer and Nanshi were simply vampires. They had taken all his money and given it to Wei Wei Bai. He Dongling couldn't hold his smile any longer, even though he could earn money. But giving away so much at once made his heart ache. Wei Wei Bai and the system were checking the affinity. Only 25. The system also shook its head. What a scum. Saving his life increased his favorability by 15 points. Wei Wei Bai frowned. It seems that we can only pray that Nanshi's favorability doesn't increase too quickly. This side target isn't easy to deal with. Scumbags usually had a hard heart. In addition, he was vigilant and had a rich experience in relationships. It was not easy to trick him. The system said, favorability has decreased. Only 20 left. Wei Wei Bai wanted to turn back time and let that perverted nurse paralyze Nanshi. Trash dog, what's the point of saving you? When Dongling came back, his face was dark. Wei Wei Bai's expression didn't look good when she saw her favorability drop. When the two of them saw each other, they smiled politely. It was indescribably creepy. The system trembled. He Dongling rubbed his fingers and said casually, "I think it's good for you to stay and take care of me. After all, we used to be husband and wife." After all, they were husband and wife. He knew that Wei Wei Bai wasn't a pervert. She wouldn't abuse him. He Dongling now had a psychological shadow when he saw a nurse. When he saw Wei Wei Bai, who saved him, he always felt that she was an angel. If she didn't take so much of his money, she would be even more angelic. Wei Wei Bai was expressionless. "How much did you give me?" He Dongling's smile froze. Talking about money hurts feelings. "Wei Wei Bai, if you don't have money, why are you talking to me about feelings?" He Dongling's smile gradually disappeared. Wait, where did that white fool who didn't take a single cent from him and was moved by his words go? // Chapter 601. He thought about the money he had left and felt that Wei Wei Bai was richer than him now. His brother was indeed an ingrate. Wasn't he afraid that his paralyzed brother would starve to death? Wei Wei Bai looked at the time. Good caregivers are very popular. I still have a few good employers to visit. Goodbye. He Dongling immediately said, "Yes, yes, yes. I'll give you a higher salary. I'll double your salary." He really needed a good caregiver in his current condition. Wei Wei Bai was the best choice. Wei Wei Bai nodded. "Okay then, I'll come back after signing the contract." He Dongling thought, she's so aware of the law. Wei Wei Bai successfully became He Dongling's caregiver. As a divorced rich woman, Wei Wei Bai expressed that she wanted to play around and enjoy life. She didn't want to face He Dongling, an old man who was half paralyzed and twice married. She couldn't go anywhere. The assassin's side mission. So she prepared a bed for He Dongling and stuffed him into his afternoon nap. She opened her laptop and started to look at He Nanshi on Weibo. Cute little fresh meat was so eye-catching. This was her little baby who was easy to win over, easy to flirt with, and easy to increase her favorability. He Dongling held the book and pretended to read for a while. He realized that Wei Wei Bai didn't care about him at all. He actually had some doubts in his heart. Wei Wei Bai became his caregiver because she still had feelings for him. Otherwise, why would she save him and take care of him? After all, even Hu Lijing had left. She must have had unfinished feelings for him if she didn't leave. But these few days, other than the necessary care, she fulfilled her duty as a caregiver. She didn't even talk to him. She was worse than a stranger. He Dongling read the book for a long time, but he couldn't turn the page. He carefully turned his face and glanced at Wei Wei Bai. She sat in a chair, and in front of her was a small desk with a notebook. Her hand carelessly supported her chin, and a few strands of hair fell to the side of her ears. The skin on her cheeks was so tender that water could be pinched out. She didn't need any makeup to see the delicate texture of her skin. Wei Wei Bai suddenly smiled. There was a warm light in her clear eyes. It was indescribably beautiful. He's favorability, 25. When Wei Wei Bai heard this, she didn't show any fluctuations. Compared to He Nanshi's 75, 25 was nothing. He Dongling found that Wei Wei Bai was really ignoring him. He finally couldn't help but put down the book. "What are you reading?" Wei Wei Bai's smile disappeared and she looked at him seriously. "Nothing." He Dongling had a gentle smile on his face and was somewhat embarrassed. He was thick-skinned and continued, "I think it's Nanshi's news." "I saw a little." Wei Wei Bai nodded and revealed a happy smile. "Yes, Nanshi is promising. The scandals on Weibo are starting to turn around, and his former fans are starting to come back. He Dongling never liked his younger brother to be in the entertainment industry. He could earn some money. He didn't expect that after the He family collapsed, He Nanshi was the most promising one. His expression softened. Can you show me? I haven't seen him in a long time. He didn't know what was wrong with He Nanshi. In the past, he would occasionally think of home and make a few calls. Now, he didn't even call. He wasn't worried that his half-paralyzed brother would die in the hospital at all. Wei Wei Bai hesitated for a moment before turning the notebook to him. He Dongling's eyes showed a hint of a smile. Indeed, Wei Wei Bai still had some feelings for him. // Chapter 602. Then, he saw a new post on her Weibo on her laptop. Nancy, you're the best. You're the best. I like you the most. From your #1 fan who loves you. He Dongling, he felt that he had to rub his face to prevent his smile from collapsing. You're Nancy's fan. Wei Wei Bai said without hesitation, yes, I've liked his songs since a long time ago. He's so handsome that even the heavens can't tolerate it. He Dongling, Wei Wei Bai, and Nancy is kind, cute and talented. When I married you, I thought that since you're Nancy's brother, you must be like him. He Dongling, so I'm a substitute. Wei Wei Bai suddenly sneered and glanced at him from the corner of her eyes. In the end, He Dongling, this look of disdain is too obvious. He Dongling felt that he had been hit. He reluctantly showed an indifferent smile. Nanshi, this child is really good. Our relationship is also very good. He often calls me when there's nothing to do, brother long, brother short. I'm the one who comforts and helps him when he encounters many setbacks. Suddenly, the phone rang. He Dongling's first reaction was to look at his phone, but then he realized that the ringtone was not right. Wei Wei Bai picked up the phone and accidentally pressed the speaker button. He Nanshi's voice rang out amidst the noise. Wei Wei, I'm going to record a show. Wei Wei Bai immediately smiled. Come on, Nancy, you can do it. He Nanshi's voice softened. I was a little nervous at first, but when I heard your voice, I felt like I could defeat the whole world. Wei Wei Bai's eyes also softened. Tell me if you have any difficulties. I'll always cheer you on Weibo. He Nanshi said with a smile, I saw it. That #1 fan is you, right? I'm very, very happy to see your message. Wei Wei Bai, that's right, always remember that I am your #1 fan. No matter what kind of situation you are in, I will never leave you. He Nanshi was silent for a long time before he said, yes, I will return to that peak for you, and then, he hesitated for a moment before changing his words. Then I'll tell everyone that you're the person I'm most grateful to. She was also his favorite person. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 80. Wei Wei Bai's finger trembled, and her favorability rose again. Damn, she felt like she really had to belly dance with the system in this world. She immediately changed the topic. Your brother, He Nanshi immediately pricked up his ears and became alert. What's wrong with my brother? He won't come to harass you, right? Don't believe him, he's just trying to cheat you of your money. He's a man with hands and feet, he won't starve to death. If you see him, just avoid him. Don't let him stick to you. He Dongling, what's the use of having a brother like you? Wei Wei Bai glanced at He Dongling who couldn't hold back his smile. She said gently, when he woke up, his legs were paralyzed. He Nanshi was stunned. Because he was angry with his brother, he didn't pay much attention to his brother's news. After all, since young, his brother was independent and deceiving people. He was strong and didn't need a family, so it had formed a deep impression of him. So he thought that his brother could take care of himself. He Nanshi, I'll go see him when I have time. Although he's very pitiful that he's paralyzed, you don't have to pity him. He still has me. I'll take care of him, /. Chapter 603. He was worried that Wei Wei Bai's heart would soften when she saw he Dongling paralyzed. He would take care of his brother. She didn't need to. He Dongling, is this his brother? This is his enemy. Wei Wei Bai, it's okay. You can go to work in peace. After that, she said a few more considerate words to let He Nanshi sing in peace and not increase his favorability. After hanging up the phone, she looked at He Dongling's half-smile and continued to look at her laptop expressionlessly. He Dongling couldn't hold the half-smile on his face. He coughed lightly and said sarcastically, "You and Nanshi have such a good relationship. Those who don't know would think that the two of you are a couple." Bai Weiwei didn't have the slightest trace of emotion, only people with filthy hearts think dirty. "Dirty He Dongling," Weiwei Bai snorted, "little guy, if you want to fight with me, I won't kill you." He Dongling suddenly said, "I want to drink water." As a nurse, Weiwei Bai went to pour water. "It's too hot." He disliked it. Weiwei Bai frowned, then lowered her head and blew on it seriously with a focused expression. He Dongling didn't say the disdain that was about to come out of his mouth. She passed the cold water to him. He Dongling didn't drink things that others blew on, but he didn't know how to reject it. It became, "You can feed me." Although Weiwei Bai was impatient, she still fed him. He Dongling took a sip, and his eyes couldn't help but be affectionate. It was like sparkling spring water, clear and gentle. "Weiwei, you," he started to fire indiscriminately again. Weiwei Bai said calmly, "Extra service, 100 yuan. He Dongling, who was as tender as water, was speechless. Weiwei Bai took out a small notebook and wrote, "This is an extra service for the caregiver. Your hand is not disabled, so feeding you water is a special service. You need a tip." He Dongling's eyes twitched, and the gentleness in them disappeared. Where was the Weiwei Bai that made his heart ache when he saw her? Who was this? Weiwei Bai sneered. "In the past, I was young and immature. I thought that as long as I liked someone, I could do anything for him, even if I was covered in scars." She sized him up coldly. "Now that you're older, you know how to be childish. So what if she likes me? Money is the most important thing. At least, she won't betray me." His tone was filled with disappointment and deep condemnation. He Dongling couldn't use his usual tricks. Even under her disdainful and reproachful gaze, he actually felt a little embarrassed. Weiwei Bai put down the cup and went back to work. He Dongling pursed his lips. His expression was gloomy, and he couldn't help but cross his fingers. After a long silence, he said, "In the past, I let you down." Weiwei Bai froze in the middle of tidying up the table, and her back stiffened. He Dongling looked at his legs. He still couldn't bear the fact that he had become a cripple. "I'm a scumbag. I thought you could afford it, so I made a move on you." He looked over from the corner of his eyes. Weiwei Bai's shoulders seemed to be trembling. He Dongling's heart twitched. It was only natural for him to be a scumbag. But in front of Weiwei Bai, he suddenly couldn't be so natural. Maybe it was because most of the people who were scumbags in the past were not good people. It was Bai Weiwei who really liked him, ba. He Dongling said lightly, "I'm sorry. Ding, he scumbag's favorability is at 30. When Weiwei Bai heard the notification, she retracted her miserable expression and turned around indifferently. "If you're really sorry, then give me more of your property." He Dongling. Fast crossing system, male god, you come here at the /crossover system, Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www.sashu.com. Download Transmigration system, Adonis, come here and read this on your phone. https://m, Sashu. Comto make it easier for you to read it next time, you can click the. Chapter 604. Wei Wei Bai was not touched at all. Her tone was even calmer than his. I heard that you still have 2 houses. He Dongling's mind was alarmed. She didn't even let go of his last bit of wealth. He immediately, very quickly said, how can you use money to express an apology? How profane of this heavy and sincere apology. Wei Wei Bai almost rolled her eyes. Don't chat with me if you don't have money. I won't forgive your apology. That's all. After saying that, she walked away in disdain and didn't even look at him. He Dongling was left alone. He Dongling wondered if he had become ugly and if his eyes were blind. Why did the tricks that had always worked so well in the past not work at all? The Wei Wei Bai he knew was not like this. When did she become so shrewd? He Dongling sighed sorrowfully. You're no longer the beautiful woman I used to know. You used to be so easy to coax. Why are you so shrewd now? He Dongling planned to do rehabilitation because his legs were paralyzed. However, rehabilitation was a very painful and long process. Under the guidance of the doctor, he slowly got up, but fell back again. Again and again. Even someone as gloomy as He Dongling couldn't take it sometimes. Wei Wei Bai watched silently and came over to help him from time to time. Sometimes, He Dongling would tease her to divert her attention. Why, do you pity me? Wei Wei Bai looked up at him. That indifferent and calm gaze didn't have a trace of sympathy. He Dongling was so thick-skinned that she felt a little embarrassed. Then Wei Wei Bai revealed a mocking smile. Do you know what it means to be pitiful? She dragged him to sit on the chair and said calmly, have you seen someone so poor that they have to sell their blood? He Dongling, Wei Wei Bai, when I was at my poorest, I didn't even have enough blood to sell. I even wanted to sell my kidney. If it weren't for the fact that I went to the bar as an escort, what you would see now would be me missing a kidney. He Dongling, although I didn't really control you, I didn't force you to this extent. Wei Wei Bai said softly, your parents forced me. He Dongling's words were stuck in his throat, and he suddenly didn't dare to say anything. Wei Wei Bai, I was even beaten up by someone with a cloth bag over my head. I couldn't afford the medical fees. I was worried that you would be sad when you saw me, so I didn't dare to go back. I could only stay in the park for a few days, hoping that the wounds wouldn't be so obvious before I went back. He Dongling's heart sank. Wei Wei Bai laughed self-deprecatingly. Humiliation, beatings, framing, no job, and no place to eat at your house. To be honest, I'm poor, but the poorest time I was when I was in your house. He Dongling moved his lips, but in the end, he couldn't say a word. Wei Wei Bai's tone was so calm that it was as if she wasn't talking about her. He Dongling, being disabled isn't scary, being poor is. You don't deserve to be pitied at all. At least you can afford to stay in a ward, hire a caregiver, and pay for rehabilitation. People like you don't know what happiness is even if you're used to being rich. He Dongling's heart was stabbed by her words again. He felt like he was bleeding this time. He lowered his eyes, and his words were a little sluggish, but they were much more sincere. Wei Wei, I'm sorry. Wei Wei Bai said, I don't forgive you. He Dongling's fingers tightened on the wheelchair. I will give you the money. Wei Wei Bai immediately said, how much? I've suffered so much. Giving me 1 million isn't much. He Dongling, it's rare for me to be so apologetic, but the feeling is gone again. Chapter 605. Sure enough, talking about money hurt feelings. Wei Wei Bai said again, how about 500,000? Don't play dead when you talk about money. He Dongling who played dead finally got angry. Money, 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 can't you see that I'm sincerely apologizing? He Dongling who had been a bad guy since he was young felt a strong sense of guilt for the first time. Why wasn't she moved? Wei Bai, get lost if you don't have money. What's the use of apologizing? Why don't you go to heaven? He Dongling, I feel like I've been hurt. My heart hurts. Ding, He Dushabag's favorability is at 35. System, you attacked him until he started doubting his life, and his favorability increased. Wei Bai, douchebags love to be cheap. If you beg him bitterly, he'll think he's charming. You have to make him doubt his life. You have to let him know that the people he hurt will hurt him in return. Only then will he know what it means to be responsible for his mistakes. Douchebags should beat him up, attack him, and mess with him. Let him feel a little warmth in the cold, then he'll have favorability. To put it bluntly, you're still cheap. He Dongling was angry. He stood up fiercely and wanted to walk away. But his legs were weak and he fell to the ground. Bai Weiwei hurriedly bent down to support him. Her petite body supported his heavy body with great effort. She seemed to struggle a little. He Dongling pressed half of his body on top of her thin body. He could hear her faint panting. He could feel that her arm was trembling with all her strength. He Dongling's heart softened. I still have some stocks. I bought them for more than 1 million. I'll give you 600,000. Wei Bai frowned and looked at him coldly. She didn't say anything. She put him in the wheelchair and looked at the time. It's time for me to get off work. Then, she turned and walked away. He Dongling was confused. Do you think the money is too little? How about 800,000? Wei Bai stopped in her tracks and turned around. Her eyes were full of ridicule. Do you really think that money can erase everything? He Dongling, the hurt you gave me will be there for the rest of my life. I won't forgive you, no matter how much money you have. With that, she lifted her feet and left. He Dongling looked at the departing figure. He wanted to stand up, but fell back down. His handsome face was a little twisted. Didn't you say that you'd forgive me if I was given 500,000? Why are you suddenly not asking for money? Why was this woman so difficult to deal with? After Wei Bai walked out, she immediately took a taxi to the TV station. She was now a fan of Hinanshi. This was Hinanshi's first interview after his comeback, so she had to support him. She had already bought tickets for the event on the internet. Although she couldn't flirt with Hinanshi, it was still good to have a look when she had time. At the scene of the interview, Hinanshi was wearing a black suit. His thick black short hair was fluffy, his eyes were deep and dark, and his legs were long and straight under his suit pants. He had a tall and slender figure, a natural model's frame. Wearing a black suit, coupled with his youthful feeling between an adult and a teenager, it fused into a kind of handsomeness that made people unable to take their eyes off him. The host had interviewed Hinanshi before. Hinanshi had become famous at a young age, but at that time, he didn't have such a textured temperament. Now, he had gone through hardships. But it was eye-catching. Hinanshi sat on the single-seater sofa, and the host was opposite him. The questions were all carefully selected. After Hinanshi's comeback, the management company that he signed with had already spoken to everyone. They told them not to push him too far. Moreover, Ninth Master didn't say anything. Everyone gave face to the management company and stopped. At https://www.sashu.com/ to read the full article at https://www.sashu.com/txt download at https://www.sashu. Calm to read on. Calm. Chapter 606. Good comments on the internet, as well as some supportive posts from Hinanshi's real fans, could also appear. Those encouraging words from before, as well as the support of those fans, were not only drowned out by the internet water army. Instead, they were deleted and banned by special forces. This was also the reason why Hinanshi could not find a single fan on the internet who said good things about him. Nanshi, long time no see. I heard that you suffered some blows previously, but now you've finally recovered. The host said with a friendly smile. Hinanshi was calm and elegant. Yes, something happened at home. Now it's settled down. The host said, your fans are also worried about you. Your comeback is the best news for them. Hinanshi did not show any sarcasm at all. Instead, he answered maturely and generously, thank you to them for always supporting me. They are all my motivation for my comeback. Clearly, because of special reasons, he could not see a single supportive fan at all. The two of them had to play their part. The new song this time is really good. Although the album is not out yet, the single has already rushed to the top of the music charts this year. Your fans say that this song has the taste of love. When Hinanshi heard this question, his ears hidden under his fluffy short hair could not help but turn red. His voice was still calm. Not yet in love. More than a crush. The host did not expect that the answer was not normal, but a topical one. He immediately asked impatiently, crush. Does Nanshi have a crush on someone? Hinanshi was a little nervous. He revealed a smile to hide his tense emotions. He wanted to say no. After all, this was a show. It did not matter if he lied. Moreover, it was too early to reveal his feelings. He did not know if it would scare her. However, he could not help but want to reveal his inner thoughts. I do have a crush. Hinanshi laughed, his eyes seemed to be filled with broken stars. She is my biggest motivation for my comeback. I hope that one day, I can tell everyone that I like her. The host looked surprised. It seems that you really like her. In this kind of situation, the words that were said could not be taken back. Many celebrities had someone they liked. When they were photographed, they would never admit it even if there was evidence. Because celebrities still had to rely on their fans to make a living. For celebrities who had someone they liked, their economic benefits would be reduced by more than half. Hinanshi actually said that he had a crush on someone at such a crucial moment in his comeback. In fact, it was very disadvantageous to his star path. Hinanshi looked at the camera with a smile in his eyes. Yeah, I like her. I like her so much that I don't even know how to confess. The host wanted to ask who it was. However, Hinanshi pursed his thin lips and continued to smile politely. His words perfectly avoided the trap. She didn't want to give the veteran host any chance to talk. Compared to the past, he was much more mature. He was also much more handsome. A unique charm of a mature man began to appear on his body. In the end, the host had no choice but to give up. Everyone followed the rules and asked the preset questions. Then the program ended. The ratings for this episode would be very high. Hinanshi greeted the host politely for a while and then thanked the staff behind the scenes. The manager's assistant immediately took the snacks that they had just bought and distributed them to the staff. Hinanshi also took small bowls of snacks and handed them to the audience. He had a very kind attitude. Chapter 607. He wanted to return to the stage again. He wanted to stand at the top. He wanted his song to be recognized by everyone and get a lot of investment support. He couldn't be as cold and indifferent as before. She passed a bowl of snacks to a girl in sunglasses in the front row. Her fingers were slender, and her palm lines were light and clean. She was so beautiful that people wanted to touch her. She placed the small bowl in her hand. Suddenly, his fingers paused. He looked at this hand. It was a familiar feeling. She didn't dare to look up. The program was recorded and would only be broadcasted next week. He thought that she wouldn't hear it. Even if she did, it would be next week. That was why he dared to say what he thought. But thinking that she had heard it in front of him, it was no different from a confession. Hinanshi's fair and handsome face blushed. He nervously pursed his thin lips and almost couldn't retract his hand. He was so nervous that he didn't know what to do. Nanshi. Her clear voice gently entered his ears. Nanshi looked up. His face was red and his breathing was irregular. Wei Bai, who was wearing sunglasses, smiled and said, "You have someone you like." "Who is it?" Nanshi didn't know if he was disappointed or relieved that he had escaped a disaster. "I'll tell you next time." Wei Bai was puzzled but happy. "Then you must bring her to see me. I'll help you check. Our Nanshi is so cute, the girl you like must be the best and cutest." Nanshi nodded frantically. "Then I'll go backstage to change first." "Don't go, I'll be back in a while." Because there weren't many people at the front desk, the seats were far away. Some were even staff, so no one could hear their whispered words. Wei Bai pursed her lips and smiled. "Okay." Nanshi immediately turned and left. When he walked to the dressing room, he saw himself in the mirror. His face was red and the depth in his eyes was filled with unconcealable joy. There was also a sense of loss. He covered his face with his hands and groaned after a long time. "Wait for me. You will soon know who I like." Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 80. The system and Wei Bai were speechless. Wei Bai cried out, "I don't think I did anything. The favorability points are rising too quickly." The system gave in. "I'll go to the mall and see if there's any underwear that can show your butt and cover your front. I'll buy you one then." Wei Bai, do you need to buy it? Just take a pair of pants and open a big hole in the back to show your butt. The system said, "You're the smart one." Wei Bai said, "Of course." The system and Wei Bai fell silent at the same time. "We're not really going to belly dance, are we?" Dumbass Su Tong covered his face. He really wanted to chop off this seductive hand. Nanshi calmed down backstage and returned to the front desk to look for her. Wei Bai had already left. He was in a daze and immediately called Wei Bai. Wei, where did you go?" Wei Bai said, "I'm going to the hospital." Nanshi's eyelashes fluttered. After a moment of silence, he said, "Are you going to see my brother?" Wei Bai said calmly, "I'll be his nurse and take care of him for a while." Nanshi's fingers trembled and he almost dropped his phone. That was why she insisted on going to work. Only because her brother needed her to take care of him. He suddenly felt that his eyes were a little sore, and his mood began to fall. "You still like my brother?" Transmigration system, Adonis, come here. Address, http://www.sashu.com/transmigration system, Adonis, come here. Address, http://www.sashu.com/transmigration system, Adonis, come here. Address, http://www.sashu.com transmigration system, Adonis, come here. Address, http://sashu.com the save button below to record this reading. Transmigration system, Adonis, come here. Chapter 608. Wei Wei Bai quickly retorted, no, it's just that we were once husband and wife. Seeing how down and out he is, it's only right to help. He still felt uneasy. Really? Wei Wei Bai promised, really. He didn't believe it, but he couldn't blatantly ask her not to take care of him. Wei Wei Bai said, we're almost there. Goodbye. The phone call ended. He remained in the same position for a long time, the grievance in his eyes thickening. He took a deep breath, but he still couldn't suppress the sour feeling in his heart. Then he called the housekeeping center. I want to find more than 5 caregivers. His brother did need someone to take care of him. But why did it have to be Wei Wei Bai? Who knew if their old feelings would rekindle as they took care of each other? He knew his brother best. His brother was the best at flirting with girls. He also liked to lie. He was worried that she would be deceived again. He stuffed his phone back into his pocket, then put his fingers into his pockets habitually and lowered his head. He was like an abandoned stray dog. I've already grown up. I'm younger and better looking than my brother. I like you more. If you like mature men, I'll be mature soon. He muttered softly, so wait for me. Wei Wei Bai looked at her phone nervously and waited for a long time. Finally, the favorability didn't increase. Bringing up his scum could indeed stop the favorability from increasing. Whether it was the guilt for his brother or the worry that Wei Wei Bai would like his brother again. She would feel conflicted. Once conflicted, the favorability wouldn't increase easily in the future. If they offset each other, the favorability would remain stable and wouldn't increase easily. Wei Wei Bai heaved a sigh of relief. Although it was time to get off work. Thinking about whether she could get more favorability points, she resigned to fate and went to the hospital to see if his scum was dead. Just as she reached the entrance of the hospital, she saw his scum being pushed out. More than 10 burly men wearing sunglasses and black suits looked like the scene of a triad boss appearing in a Hong Kong film. She was shocked. What was going on? Trash he actually mingled with the underworld. Wei Wei Bai asked the system. The system flipped through the information. These people are all Elder Zhou's people. They're here to find trouble. She didn't defend Master Zhou, so at most, he was implicated. Dongling went against Master Zhou directly and woke up in a vegetative state. Master Zhou felt that this kind of person needed to be educated, so he sent someone to pick him up. Was this education going to be dissected or filled with cement and sunk into the sea? Actually, she also felt that Jerk did need to be educated. But now that he was dead, was it appropriate to leave her, his ex-widow, to belly dance? Dongling sat in a wheelchair. His face was pale, but his eyes were terrifyingly dark, like a black whirlpool without any light. When he saw Master Zhou's men coming, he was actually glad that Wei Wei Bai had left early. Otherwise, it wouldn't be worth it to implicate another person. Dongling couldn't help but rub his fingers together. This was an instinctive action for him to ease his nerves. The extended Rolls-Royce was parked under a Chinese parasol tree not far from the hospital. He looked at the car and slowly heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that he couldn't think of being kind today. Offending Master Zhou was the worst investment he had ever made in his life. Now, it was time to repay the debt of his mistake. Dongling. A familiar voice, clear and soft, but almost pierced his heart. Dongling turned to look. He saw Wei Wei Bai walking over quickly. Because she was in a hurry, her hair was a little messy and she didn't have time to tie it up. Chapter 609. Her delicate skin had a delicate beauty under the sun. He Dongling's heart suddenly lifted. The words that reached his mouth to let her go didn't come out, but he swallowed them back. Because one of the burly men had already walked over. Reminding Wei Wei Bai had become a meaningless action, other than making Sire Jiu angrier. So he didn't say anything rationally. He allowed Wei Wei Bai to walk to his side with a blank and vigilant expression. She passed through the burly men. She didn't turn around and run. Instead, she walked to his side. What's wrong? He Dongling held the armrest of the chair with his fingers. His thin lips were pursed tightly, and a trace of gloominess flashed across his eyes. Nothing, it's just that a creditor is here. Wei Wei Bai was stunned. They had already walked to the back door of the Rolls-Royce. Someone opened the door and pushed He Dongling in. Wei Wei Bai was also pushed in. The car was very spacious. It was obvious that it had been modified and reinforced. Even the windows were strengthened versions of bulletproof glass. An old man wearing a colorful shirt, a 3-kilogram gold necklace, black leather shoes, and a cigar in his hand appeared. He Dongling's neck was tense, and he almost couldn't lower his head. The white-haired old man had a terrifying aura. His eyes were as cold as a venomous snake as he glanced at He Dongling. Little brat, you're lucky. I knocked you into a vegetative state, but you can still wake up. He Dongling crossed his fingers. His fingertips were a little white. He smiled. Sire Jiu, I've offended you. I hope you can let the He family off on the account that I'm half paralyzed. Sire Jiu's fierce-looking face trembled. He laughed coldly. Your ambition and your refined appearance make you look like a wolf in sheep's clothing. You know when to yield and when to stand tall. When a seedling like you grows up, you'll be a Sire Jiu in the future. He Dongling sat in a wheelchair, but because he was in the car, he was close to Sire Jiu. He naturally took the match beside him, lit it up, and lit Sire Jiu's cigarette. That's because I was young and immature. Haven't you seen a rash fool before? That's exactly what happened to me. Only after I was badly battered did I realize that there are some things that I can't covet. He was neither servile nor overbearing. Even when he lowered his head, he did it elegantly and calmly. Sire Jiu thought highly of him. He took a puff of his cigar and looked coldly at He Dongling. He Dongling's smile was gentle, but his little rubbing action was still obvious. Jiu Yi narrowed his eyes viciously. Although I cherish talents, I can't keep poisonous talents. He Dongling, you're very ambitious. Now you're a wolf cub with a broken leg. In the future, you'll be a man-eating beast. He Dongling's smile gradually disappeared. He knew. Lord Nine came back this time to take his life. Even if he was paralyzed, although he was irritable, this kind of difficulty was not enough to defeat him. But with Lord Jiu's current strength. Indeed, he could easily kill him. It was all his fault for being too young and too impatient. That was why he had provoked Ninth Elder, this venomous snake. Ninth Elder took out his gun. You're a young man that I admire very much. Let me personally send you on your way. There was no fear in He Dongling's eyes, only unwillingness. He bit his lip and clenched his fists tightly. Was it going to end like this? A mistake caused the He family to collapse and also caused him to lose his life. The price of this mistake was too great. A debt must be repaid with money, and a life for a life. Does Dongling owe a life debt? A clear question rang out in the murderous car. To read the full article at https://www.sashu.com to read on your phone, https://m.sashu.com. Chapter 610. Sire Nine's fingers paused. He turned his head and saw Wei Wei Bai sitting beside the wheelchair. When Bai Weiwei was pushed in together, both men were aware of it. But in this kind of situation, no one took women seriously. So she had been ignored. If she didn't speak. A trace of nervousness flashed across He Dongling's eyes, and his fingers even trembled. Sire Nine's cold eyes looked over and saw that Wei Wei Bai didn't have a trace of fear on her face. There was a stubborn clarity in her almond-shaped eyes, like a flower that had just bloomed, with a sense of vitality. She was so beautiful that she was full of vitality. This was a vitality that an old man in his 60s didn't have. The anger in Sire Nine's eyes faded. He said as if he was teasing a pet, "He only owes money for a piece of land, but I want him to pay it back." Wei Wei Bai frowned and looked up at him disapprovingly. "Then you're in the wrong." This sentence was bold and presumptuous. Even if Sire Nine had a gun in his hand, Wei Wei Bai acted like an ordinary person, turning a blind eye and acting sweet. He Dongling suddenly shouted, "Wei Wei Bai, why are you causing trouble? Hurry up and apologize to Sire Nine." His heart was in his mouth. If Wei Wei Bai hadn't been noticed, according to Sire Nine's usual practice, she wouldn't have died. Just like He Nanshi. Because she didn't participate in this matter from the beginning to the end, she was only slandered, causing her to suffer a setback in her career. So she would be fine, because she was the same as He Nanshi, an innocent person. Wei Wei Bai looked at He Dongling, and a gentle look flashed across her eyes. He Dongling was stunned. That gaze, Wei Wei Bai looked at Sire Nine again. Owing a piece of land is a matter of money. A human life is more important than the sky. Dongling didn't kill anyone, so you can't kill him. Jiu Yi suddenly laughed. His laughter was hoarse and terrifying. The muscles on his face trembled. "Little girl, this is not your home. You can say whatever you want." "Wei Wei Bai, what I said is fair and just. Why can't I say it? Who needs a life to repay a debt? Why are you so unreasonable?" Lord Nine's smile froze. "Why are you so unreasonable?" This sentence was so familiar, and it immediately pulled him back to those past years. There was once a girl who disagreed with him and said the same thing to him. Sire Jiu looked at Wei Wei Bai's face. They clearly looked different. But his expression and words were so naive that they were stupid. Yet they were so similar. Lord Jiu's tone softened. "Then how do you think I should deal with this matter? He Dongling owes me a lot of money for that piece of land." Wei Wei Bai raised her eyebrows. Her eyes were bright and beautiful. "No matter how many lives there are, we can still earn money. But if people are gone, then there's nothing left." Jiu Ye's eyes trembled. It was too similar. These words were filled with a sense of naivety and recklessness. His eyes were a little moist. The gun in his hand suddenly couldn't be pointed at Wei Wei Bai. Lord Nine had been through a lot. Even when facing such a similar girl. When he should be ruthless, he was still ruthless. "But I just want him to pay back his life because I'm unreasonable." With that said, Lord Nine raised his gun and was about to shoot at He Dongling. But just as the muzzle of the gun moved in front of He Dongling, Wei Wei Bai was already in front of He Dongling. She was extremely nervous as she faced the muzzle of the gun. A cold light flashed across Lord Nine's eyes. "Little girl, I remember that you should have divorced He Dongling. You should hate him and not save him. He had investigated the He family's matters clearly." // Chapter 611. When He Dongling heard this, he also looked up and saw Wei Wei Bai's tense back. She stubbornly held on, her muscles were trembling in fear. But she refused to move her body. Wasn't she afraid of death? He Dongling admitted that he was afraid of death. He even let out a sigh of relief when she blocked him. But when he saw her thin body blocking him behind her, all kinds of feelings flashed through his heart, but the shock was the most obvious. Even if they were in love, they still broke up just like that. How could she say that she didn't love him, and even risk her life for him? Ding, Slag's favorability is at 35. Wei Wei Bai's forehead was covered in sweat. She was so scared that her face was a little pale. But she still revealed a smile. There's no other way. A day as husband and wife means endless kindness. Just like debts have to be repaid, kindness also needs to be repaid. Jiu Yi, kindness. Wei Wei Bai nodded and her smile became gentle. He is the man I loved. No matter if this relationship is completely unrecognizable or full of holes, to me, when we first met, this love brought me great happiness. Isn't it a kind of kindness for a person to bring you happiness? He Dongling held his breath. His thick and cold heart wall. Her words hit him hard in the head. He didn't have time to distinguish whether it was shame or something else. Ding, Slag's favorability is at 40. Wei Wei Bai's smile deepened. He doesn't love me, but I loved him. Even if I let it go now, I still hope that the person I loved can be happy. Jiu Ye's fierce expression softened. You're really a good child. These words were filled with distant memories. No one knew who he was talking about. Wei Wei Bai let out a sigh of relief. The next moment, Jiu Yi said coldly, "It's a pity that you still have to die. If you like him so much, then let's die together." With that, he pulled the trigger. He Dongling's mind was blank. He pushed Wei Wei Bai hard with both hands, letting her dodge the bullet. He clearly cherished his life the most. He wouldn't even frown if anyone died. Wei Wei Bai was nothing to him. But before his rationality could stop him, his instincts chose to protect Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai fell to the ground, her face almost disfigured. She quickly looked at He Dongling and found that He Dongling's handsome face was pale, but there was no more bloody hole in his body. Wei Wei Bai said, "Tongzi, you made the right bet. There was no bullet in the first shot. The system was very calm. What's the point of gambling? I already said that there was only one bullet in this ugly old man's gun. That bullet wasn't from the first shot." Jiu Yi laughed again. This time, his laughter had a more hearty feeling. "Looks like a wolf cub like you still has a weakness. I thought you would even betray your parents at critical moments." He Dongling's muscles tensed up. He thought he was going to die. His lips trembled slightly, and he forced himself to maintain his dignity. "Jiu Yi, you must be joking. I'm not that heartless." Jiu Yi put away his gun. "Seeing that you still have some affection in your heart at critical moments and didn't let your wife take the bullet for you, I'll let you go this time." He Dongling didn't feel happy. The humiliation and anger in his heart grew stronger. But he hid the hatred in his eyes and revealed a grateful smile. "Thank you for your mercy, Jiu Yi." Jiu Yi was expressionless. "Thank your wife." "No, it should be your ex. You really have no taste. You gave up a woman who took the bullet for you." He Dongling couldn't help but look at Wei Wei Bai. Chapter 612. He found that she had already stood up and hurriedly walked to his side to push his wheelchair. She smiled and said, "Then we won't disturb you, we'll leave first." He Dongling didn't say anything, so she used all her strength to push him out of the car. Jiu Yi suddenly said, "Little girl, you're called Wei Wei Bai, right?" Wei Wei Bai turned around and revealed a cute smile. "Yes, then what's your name?" Jiu Yi paused and was silent for a few seconds before saying, "I'm called Jiu Yi." Wei Wei Bai, what a strange name, then goodbye, Jiu Yi. Jiu Ye's wrinkled face trembled, but in the end, he didn't say anything inappropriate. When Wei Wei Bai got out of the car, he couldn't see her back anymore. Jiu Ye slowly took out a photo from his chest. The photo was yellow, and there was a cute girl with an innocent smile on it. What's your name? Jiu Ye. Why do you have such a strange name? Other people call me that, I'm used to it. Then who are you looking for? I've never seen you before. I'm your father. The tears in Jiu Ye's eyes fell on the photo, and he quickly wiped them with his sleeve. Darling, Daddy saw a girl who looks like you today, you're both as innocent and as reckless. He wiped the corners of his eyes again, I miss you. After Wei Wei Bai got out of the car, her legs were about to turn to jelly, the triads were so scary. She hurriedly pushed He Dongling as if she was running for her life, taking large strides forward with all her might. When He Dongling confronted Jiu Ye just now, Wei Wei Bai was already desperately looking at Jiu Ye's information that the system gave her. Then, in those short few minutes, she finished reading Jiu Ye's magnificent life. Then, she found the person that Jiu Ye cared about the most, his daughter, a cute and silly little princess. She immediately imitated it, and it worked. She cried to the system, can't I complain to the main system that I'm poor and see if there's a system poverty guarantee? See if I can save some money to repair the rejection button of the side mission. If this continued, she wouldn't die on the main mission. Sooner or later, he would be killed by the side quests. The system said, the poverty subsistence allowance is the destruction of the poor system. Poverty should not exist in this world. This is the main system's concept. By Wei Wei, this main system is too deranged, BA. So what if he was poor? Did he eat your life points? The system said, don't worry, you can do it. Just watch silly white sweet act and you'll be out of trouble. When Wei Wei Bai heard this, she didn't even have the mood to show off. She sighed and said, it's the easiest role to play. There's no sense of achievement at all. His motherly yet seductive sister-in-law, his energetic ex-wife, his silly and sweet little princess who spoke without thinking. The host actually didn't differentiate between the two. The system expressed that the acting skills of a movie queen were indeed frightening. He Dongling suddenly said, Wei Wei. Bai Wei Wei stopped in her tracks and looked at him in confusion. He Dongling clenched and loosened his fingers. His face was completely pale, and his eyes were filled with a sharp sense of ruthlessness. Why did you say that? Why did you take the bullet for me? Don't you know you'll die? Wei Wei Bai was silent. Her spirited eyebrows suddenly drooped. She was unspeakably pitiful. He Dongling didn't let her go. His heart was in a mess, and he couldn't even sort out his own emotions. His back was covered in cold sweat. If he had taken a wrong step, he would have died. But in the face of death, he was still able to maintain his rationality despite being frightened and nervous. But her appearance completely messed him up. Chapter 613. He Dongling's tone became fierce. Haven't you seen my true colors? I'm just playing with you. Do you still love me? When he questioned this sentence, he was actually indescribably nervous. Wei Wei Bai's lips moved, but she didn't make a sound. He Dongling frowned, his eyes filled with deep and chaotic irritation. He turned around and was about to continue questioning. But he saw that Wei Wei Bai's face was full of tears. She bit her lips and didn't cry out loud. Tears flowed out drop by drop, the tip of her nose was red, crying pitifully and cutely. He Dongling's words were stuck in his throat, and he couldn't say a single word. The tears of surviving a disaster were filled with relief, but not happiness. He Dongling realized that he had gone overboard. She risked her life to save him. But he cared about himself and was busy questioning her. He Dongling admitted that he was a scumbag, but to be honest, this was the first time he was such a scumbag to a weak woman from beginning to end. He gritted his teeth and said something that he would never say normally. I will become stronger. Master Jiu will definitely not be able to do anything to me, let alone touch you, so don't cry. He wanted to save face, and his thoughts were deep. Such bold words. If he didn't succeed, it would be very difficult to say it out loud. But when he saw her tears of fear, he couldn't care less. Ding, he Slag's favorability is at 50. Wei Wei Bai sobbed and said, then when will you become stronger? He Dongling's expression froze. It should be soon. Wei Wei Bai, that means it won't be long. 10 years will be very soon. He Dongling, Wei Wei Bai, that's why I risked my life to save you, and came back after work to serve you. There's no problem with the extra fee, right? He Dongling, Wei Wei Bai had already retracted her tears and was seriously checking the numbers. Look, it costs at least 10,000 to block a bullet. I won't ask for much overtime, just 500 yuan. As for the mental damage, just a few thousand will do. Also, when you pushed me just now, I fell and was in so much pain. Just a few thousand will do. He Dongling supported his forehead with his hand. His head hurt. Who am I? Where am I? Where did my beautiful ex-wife who only wanted true love and didn't want money go? How I miss the idiot from before. She only remembered to ask for money when he was poor. Why didn't she sympathize with a paralyzed old man like him? It wasn't easy for him to earn money. After he Dongling returned to the hospital and transferred the money to Wei Wei Bai, he was suddenly enlightened. His legs had to be rehabilitated, and he had to continue earning money. They had to fight for their rights at all costs. The experience of death did not scare him out of his wits. Instead, it aroused the ruthless and savage desire in his heart. Only those who were above others could control their own lives. He would not allow anyone to point a gun at his head a second time. He fell to the ground again. He Dongling was sweating profusely. Wei Wei Bai came over to help him. He Dongling watched as she struggled to help him to a chair. Then, she took out a clean towel, wiped his sweat, and poured him a glass of water. He Dongling did not resist at all. Instead, he obediently allowed her to do as she pleased. Sometimes, when he looked at her, there would be a hint of undetectable gentleness in his eyes. It was a flash of light. It was not much, but it was very precious. No caregiver was so considerate. There wouldn't be any caregiver who would work overtime after work either. And no caregiver would dare to take a bullet for him. So, she still liked him. Is at https://www.sashu.com// Chapter 614. He Dongling smiled proudly and took a sip of water. Ding, he Dushabag's favorability is at 55. Wei Wei Bai was surprised. How did the favorability increase? She didn't seem to have done anything. The system said, it's good that it increased, who cares how it increased? Wei Wei Bai felt that the system was right. As long as it wasn't dancing, it was fine to do anything. He Dongling finished showering and was pushed out of the bathroom by the male nurse. Wei Wei Bai's job as a caregiver was to take care of the daily life. She didn't do it, but specially hired a male caregiver from the hospital to do it. He Dongling remembered that when they were husband and wife, he was never willing to touch her. So it was natural that she would be shy. He couldn't bear to force her on this. Wei Wei Bai had just liked Hinanchi's Weibo when she turned around and saw Hinanchi coming out. She gave him the medicine and water. After he Dongling took the medicine, he looked up and stared at her seriously. His eyes were heavy, with a dark light, and a trace of undetectable tenderness. He said in a low voice, Wei Wei. Wei Wei Bai was still thinking about Hinanqi's award on Weibo, so she nodded casually. He Dongling hesitated. Today is the Mid-Autumn Festival. Wei Wei Bai's eyes drifted to the notebook. Oh, the Mid-Autumn Festival. No wonder there was a lottery on Weibo, and the prize for the 10th place was Doraemon's 2-meter doll. She wanted it. He Dongling saw that she was being perfunctory, and his face turned ugly. The words that were about to come out of his mouth also stopped. He was a douchebag, but he cared about his reputation. Wei Wei Bai, is there anything else? If there's nothing else, then I'll go online and repost on Weibo. He Dongling suddenly said unhappily, Nanqi's Weibo. Wei Wei Bai nodded. The prize is very good. I'll try to draw a prize. After that, Wei Wei Bai opened Weibo and logged in. He Dongling's mouth twitched. He couldn't help but take out his phone and open his cheap brother's Weibo. It was obvious that the comments on Weibo were being controlled. All the negative comments had been deleted, leaving behind a bunch of die-hard fans and a few moderators who were praising Hinanqi's beauty. He Dongling glanced at the prize. It was dazzling. He couldn't help but ask, which prize do you want? Wei Wei Bai answered casually, Doraemon. He Dongling, how childish. He coughed lightly. I'll buy it for you. Wei Wei Bai didn't even turn her head back. If you buy it, it won't be as exciting as the lucky draw. He Dongling, who was rejected, he was silent for a few seconds and decided not to lose face. He continued to invite her. You did a good job as a caregiver. I'll give you a prize. Wei Wei Bai turned around. What prize? He Dongling, push me out. Wei Wei Bai didn't think much of it and pushed him out. He Dongling smiled. He was indescribably satisfied and happy. Wei Wei Bai pushed He Dongling into the jewelry store. Then he took out a ring box. Wei Wei Bai glanced at it and thought that he was going to do something. For example, propose or something. She could also reject him in passing. But He Dongling put the ring box in his pocket and had no intention of giving it to her. Wei Wei Bai didn't think much of it and followed He Dongling to the gift shop. He Dongling bought her a 2-meter blue fatty. Do you like this gift? Wei Wei Bai looked at the blue fatty and suddenly lost interest in the lottery. Because this 2-meter doll was the prize she was going to draw. Chapter 6:15. She carried the 2-meter tall fatty blue back. He Dongling controlled the smart wheelchair and followed behind slowly. When they arrived at the hospital, they saw the entrance of the hospital from afar. There was a conspicuous figure standing there. He was tall and thin. He was wearing a black silk coat with loose sleeves and a soft hood on his head. He was carrying the 2-meter tall fatty blue. A black mask covered his face, revealing only a pair of beautiful eyes and some fair skin. It was Hinanqi. Wei Wei Bai was about to greet him. Hinanqi had already reacted. When he was waiting in boredom, his eyebrows were drooping. When he saw Wei Wei Bai, his eyes lit up. Even his eyes were shining. Then Hinanqi saw that she was holding a Doraemon in her hands. It was exactly the same as the one in his hands. Then he finally saw his brother appear behind Wei Wei Bai. Hinanqi's eyes dimmed. Could it be that Wei Wei Bai still liked his brother? He hesitated for a moment but still walked over. He walked faster and faster. In the blink of an eye, he walked in front of Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei, happy Mid-Autumn Festival. Today is a day to reunite with family. I immediately thought of being with you. Wei Wei Bai revealed a big smile. I bought some fruits and snacks. Let's admire the moon on the rooftop later. Hinanshi's dim eyes were instantly dyed with light. He nodded. Okay. Dongling, who was ignored behind, was speechless. Wasn't he Hinanshi's brother? Wasn't he Wei Wei Bai's ex-husband? In terms of family, these two people's family should be him. Dongling deliberately cleared his throat. In the end, the two young people who were carrying the fatty blue were chatting enthusiastically. They completely forgot about the old man sitting in the wheelchair behind them. The old man deliberately coughed again, no one heard it. He coughed repeatedly. Wei Wei Bai turned around. What's wrong with you? Do you need some water? Dongling immediately nodded. 1 cup for 100 will do. There was a water feeding service for 100 yuan worth of water. Back in the ward, Hinanshi put the blue fatty where Wei Wei Bai was sitting. Then, without batting an eyelid, he kicked the blue fatty that his brother had given him aside. Dongling saw it with his sharp eyes and his eyebrows twitched. Wei Wei Bai brought some water and was about to bend down to feed him. Hinanshi rushed over and took the cup from Wei Wei Bai's hands. I'll do it. Brother, I'll take care of you. Dongling's eyebrows were not only twitching, but the corners of his mouth were also trembling. I thought you had forgotten that I was your brother. You only remembered to see me when your brother was paralyzed. Hinanshi pursed his lips and lowered his eyes. Brother, I'm sorry. I'm too busy. Such a big thing happened at home. I need to carry this family like a man. Dongling's eyebrows relaxed. That was true. His family was in such a mess. This youngest brother of his had not suffered much since he was young. Even when he grew up, he was well behaved, like a good child who did not dare to do anything bad. He thought that Hinanshi would not be able to recover from the setback when his family was in such a state. Unexpectedly, the result was somewhat similar to him. He could actually start afresh, show his ambition and talent, and climb up little by little. Dongling was about to forgive him. But then he heard him say, the burden of the family is heavy. You can't do it, and you can't earn much money. You're old and your major is not outstanding. I thought that you could go out and set up a street stall when you woke up and go to the construction site to carry some bricks to support the family, but you're paralyzed. I can only bear the heavy burden of a family and raise a pair of pitiful old parents, a poor brother who is paralyzed and useless. Poor useless brother. Download the mobile article at https://m.sashu.com. Chapter 6:16. Dongling felt that his entire face was twitching. He moved his lips. This is disdain. This was a blatant display of disdain. He could only go out to carry bricks and set up a stall. He even had a paralyzed older brother who was useless. Who is this? Is he so pitiful in other people's eyes? Wei Wei Bai's voice was full of pity. Nanshi, you've worked hard. Nanshi's hair drooped. He lowered his eyelashes and said obediently, it's not hard. To support my sister, I have to support a half-paralyzed older brother who is useless. He's definitely not suitable to get married again. I'll work hard to earn a lot of money. Wei Wei Bai's expression softened. You don't mind that your brother is paralyzed? Nanshi said, although he's useless and disabled, he's still my brother. Dongling, who had no sense of presence at the side, had a curse word that he didn't know if he should say. Nanshi suddenly smiled gently at his brother. Brother, drink some water. Otherwise, Wei Wei will be worried again. Dongling's eyes were about to shoot cold arrows. He snorted and drank the water. After drinking the water, Nanshi put down the cup and spread his hands. Pay up, 100 yuan. Dongling, Nanshi said, I heard Wei Wei say that this is an extra service and you have to pay for it. You don't even have 100 yuan. You can owe it first. He felt that he wasn't half paralyzed, but had a heart attack. He was going to die from anger. Wei Wei Bai was afraid that Nanshi would anger Dongling to death. She had to mediate. It's the Mid-Autumn Festival. It's a good time for you brothers to get together. Let's go and admire the moon. Nanshi said gently to his brother, "Brother, are you tired? Your legs are inconvenient and your body is weak. You should rest early." Dongling also smiled, even more gently than him. "You're really considerate of me, but I'm in good health. I just have 2 useless legs. Anyway, I have a lot of money and I'm a noble person. I don't need to walk at all, so it doesn't matter. You're the one who needs to take care of your body. I've heard that there are a lot of actors who suddenly die on the stage." Nanshi, who are you calling a small-time actress? The 2 brothers chuckled as they looked at each other. Then, they turned their faces away at the same time, revealing expressions of disdain. Wei Wei Bai completely ignored them. As long as one of the favorability didn't increase or decrease, the other didn't. She was as calm as the wind. When they were admiring the full moon, the 3 of them occupied the rooftop of the hospital. A picnic cloth was laid out with snacks, fruits, and a box of mooncakes. The moon was big and round, making the 3 people's faces pale. Bai Weiwei sent Nanshi to run errands to get the lights, otherwise the moonlight effect would be too horrifying. Nanshi left in a hurry and came back in a hurry. He was so fast that he didn't give Dongling any time to interact with Wei Wei Bai. Dongling wanted to say to Wei Wei Bai, but he swallowed the "Happy Mid-Autumn Festival" that he was about to say. Nanshi passed the cut fruit to Wei Wei Bai. "Wei Wei, this is delicious. Eat some." Wei Wei Bai looked at the moon and took it. "You eat too." Nanshi smiled, his eyes full of happiness. Dongling pursed his lips and didn't say a word. He couldn't ask for food himself, right? That would be too degrading. Nanshi gave Bai Weiwei a paper towel, as well as the delicious snacks he ate. He gave more than half of them to Bai Weiwei. Dongling watched from the side, but he didn't get a share. Nanshi suddenly thought of his cheap brother and handed him a mooncake. "Eat some, brother." / save button below to record this reading record. Chapter 617. Dongling finally relaxed. He finally remembered his brother. He stuffed all the delicious food to his sister-in-law. If it wasn't for the fact that he thought it was impossible, he would have thought that Nanshi, this blockhead, had been enlightened and liked Wei Wei Bai. Nanshi was still a good child after all. It was probably because he knew about the terrible things he had done and Wei Wei Bai's pitiful past. That was why he was acting like this. Dongling picked up the mooncake and was about to eat it when he realized that something was wrong. He took it out of his mouth again. At first glance, it was the 5-kernel mooncake. He hated the filling the most. Wei Wei Bai looked at the moon and realized that the moon in this world was not much bigger than the moon in her reality. So she yawned and wanted to go back to sleep. However, Nanshi suddenly came over. "Sleepy? I'll lend you my shoulder. We'll go down later." Wei Wei Bai nodded. After all, there were still a lot of snacks and fruits. It wouldn't be a waste to let Nanshi eat them. She gently tilted her head and rested it on Nanshi's shoulder. The strong shoulder looked very thin, but it was very thick as a pillow. Nanshi was aware that her head, with a slight force, rested on his shoulder. Long strands of hair fell over his shoulder. The fragrance of the hair was more intoxicating than the moonlight. Nanshi was so nervous that his ears turned red. His hand holding the fruit couldn't stop trembling. He was worried that Wei Wei Bai would see that something was wrong, so he didn't dare to not move. Wei Bai's breathing slowed down. Light and average. Hinanshi reluctantly glanced sideways at her and saw her small and straight nose, as well as her bright red and beautiful lips under the moonlight. It was like a stunning beauty. In Hinanshi's beautiful pupils, only her face was reflected in them. He couldn't help but smile. How nice. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 85. The system silently glanced at the shop. Was the underwear that showed her but still there? Let's take advantage of the discount and buy two. He Dongling, who was sitting in a wheelchair, looked up and saw their figures leaning against each other. One was petite while the other was tall and slender. Under the moonlight, they were a perfect match. He Dongling's eyelids twitched as a trace of doubt flashed through his dark eyes. He pursed his lips and glanced at them again. In this atmosphere, there was always a sour smell in the air. He Dongling looked at them as he took a big bite of the mooncake. Disgusting, disgusting. Hinanshi felt that the temperature was a little cold. Just as he was about to reach out to carry Wei Bai and go downstairs, he heard a cold voice. Suddenly, a cold voice came from behind. Nanshi, Wei is a good girl. Hinanshi's fingers froze. He lowered his eyes, knowing that his brother was testing him. But in the end, his expression softened and he replied, yes, she's very good. In the midst of adversity, deep in the swamp. In a place that was even darker than where he was standing, there was light. Pulling him out of hell. In this world, there was no better girl than her. He Dongling heard him reply without hesitation and his heart tightened. Then he said, I want to marry her again. Hinanshi, He Dongling said, so she's still your sister-in-law? Hinanshi suddenly asked, did she agree? He Dongling was stumped for a moment before he said, almost. Hinanshi let out a sigh of relief, but she didn't agree. I know, brother. There was no intense emotion, nor was there a rush to show anything. Hinanshi said this very calmly. He Dongling's test hit cotton, soft and uncomfortable. Hinanshi carefully reached out and carried Wei Bai. // Chapter 618. Wei Bai was tired, so she slept soundly. She leaned softly in Hinanshi's arms, defenseless. Hinanshi said, brother, I'll take Wei down first. It's cold here. I'm afraid she'll catch a cold. He Dongling nodded. Go ahead. Hinanshi nodded and strode away. He Dongling was left in the same spot for a while. Wait, no one was pushing him down the stairs. How was he going to go down? Back in the ward. Hinanshi put by Wei in the place where relatives were accompanying the bed. The two blue fatties were placed quietly in the corner. Hinanshi looked at the one given by his brother and wanted to stuff it into the rubbish bin. But the rubbish bin was not big enough to stuff it in. He specially organized a lucky draw. She had once said that she liked cartoons. Especially Doraemon. Therefore, he specially picked out a blue fatty with a cute smile for her. But he was afraid that it would be too obvious, so he put it on Weibo's lucky draw. The blue fat tie was not expensive, but as the first prize, it was too special. Plus, the first prize was not easy to draw, so he specially asked his assistant to buy an Apple laptop as the first prize. The first 9 prizes were very expensive, only the 10th prize was not eye-catching and expensive. What was expensive was only his feelings. But she did not draw, so he had to carry the blue fat tie to find her. Hinanshi covered Wei Bai with a blanket. When she was asleep, she was so quiet. Her weak and pure appearance was like the water he was holding, soft and unrestrained. But clear and attractive. Hinanshi was a little nervous. His breathing quickened and his face was a little red. She suddenly whispered something softly. He hurriedly tried to listen, but it was just a meaningless sleep talk. She suddenly turned around and brushed her lips past his ear. Her warm breath tickled his ear, tickling his heart. Hinanchi's brain could not work, and his body was as tense as a rock. With great difficulty, he finally regained his breath. Hinanchi's eyes were burning, but he was suppressing it. When he saw her fingers poking out from under the blanket, he couldn't help but hold them, wanting to put them back so that she wouldn't catch a cold. After holding her hand, he couldn't help but pinch her soft, boneless fingers. After he was done, he couldn't help but measure the ring finger with his finger. This is where the ring is. Hinanchi measured her. After knowing her approximate size, he couldn't help but say, "You're a little thin. I'll fatten you up in the future." He looked up and saw that she was still sleeping soundly. Hinanchi pursed his lips. In the end, he couldn't resist the desire in his heart. He bent down and slowly lowered his head, sucking on her lips. Her lips were soft and plump, just like a flower full of honey. It made him want more. After a deep kiss, Hinanchi raised his head with a red face and neck, but felt a chill on his back. He turned around. The door was open. Dongling didn't know how long he had been sitting at the door. The two men looked at each other, and the atmosphere was suffocating. After a while, Dongling took out a cigarette and put it in his mouth. After lighting it casually, he looked through the smoke. He smiled coldly. "Yo, Nanchi has really grown up. You even have a sister-in-law." Hinanchi was silent for a while before correcting him. "Ex-sister-in-law." Dongling almost broke the cigarette in his hand. "Ex-sister-in-law is also your sister-in-law. You haven't even grown hair yet. How can you let your brother down?" Hinanchi immediately replied in a low voice, "You let her down first." Dongling was speechless. "I let her down, so you're going to let me down. Is this the same thing?" Chapter 619. Dongling finally thought of a rebuttal. In the end, Hinanchi said faintly, "I want to marry her. Husband and wife are one. If I let you down, then she let you down. You let her down, so we're even. The system that was eating supper when it was hungry, this bandit logic, full marks." Dongling kept shaking the cigarette in his hand, the smoke forming an S shape. He took a few deep breaths before waving his hand to signal Hinanchi to come out. After all, this was a matter between men. So the two brothers had a tacit understanding not to disturb Weiwei Bai's sleep. When they reached the corridor, Dongling signaled Hinanchi to lower his head. Hinanchi calmly obeyed and punched him in the face. Hinanchi took a few steps back. This punch made his gums bleed. He spat out a mouthful of blood and wiped his mouth with his sleeve expressionlessly. Dongling hit him and the back of his hand was numb. "So you're not going to give up?" Hinanchi tilted his head. His complexion was fair and clear. His delicate features usually looked a little too feminine. But he suddenly revealed a cold smile. The sharpness and viciousness in his eyes made the soft parts of his face disappear, leaving only unyielding coldness. "Brother, you don't want her, but I want her." Dongling took a puff of his cigarette irritably. "I'm going back on my word. She's very good." He had played with countless women. But who could be like Weiwei Bai? For him, she endured so many hardships and wasn't afraid. When the He family collapsed, she didn't run. When he was paralyzed, although her face was cold, she still stayed by his side. Dongling wasn't stupid. In fact, he was a cold and calculating businessman. He never knew that he had made the most successful business deal. Unexpectedly, he accidentally married Weiwei Bai because of his playfulness. But the biggest failure of business was that he had actually given up on her just like that. He Dongling could not bear to give up on Wei Wei Bai. There would not be a second one in the future. He Nanqi's eyes darkened. He suddenly raised his head and revealed his delicate chin. He said expressionlessly, "There's no one in this world who can be taken back just because you say so. I'm young and have a bright future. I like her to death. What can you give her?" He Dongling pursed his thin lips and narrowed his eyes, which were full of ruthlessness. He Nanqi was not afraid at all. He carelessly rubbed the corner of his lips with his finger. A punch in exchange for a kiss, he felt that it was too worth it. "I know you, brother. At most, you like her a little. You feel that Wei Wei is good to you and won't abandon you when you're in danger. If you get her, you'll get more love." He Dongling gritted his teeth. He Nanqi, shut up. He Nanqi's beautiful eyes drooped down, filled with an unyielding feeling. "I don't understand. What right do you have to treat her like this? You feel that she's good and you're going back on your words and not letting her go. Is this what you call liking her? You're just a selfish bastard." He Nanqi said fiercely, "I won't let her be sad. I'll do my best to give her happiness. It doesn't matter if she doesn't love me or like me because I'll give her everything I have, including love. If I'm in dire straits and she abandons me, I'll be glad that I don't implicate her. Even if I'm crippled and she doesn't want me, I'll be happy. She doesn't have to take care of me and can get more happiness." These words were said fiercely and anxiously. They were filled with a wolf's nature. He Nanqi walked a few steps in front of He Dongling and reached out to grab his collar. He laughed coldly. "Can you do it, brother? You can't. You're already in dire straits and you still want to use her to take care of you. What you want is a nanny and a servant. You'll be able to see it the next time you open the bookshelf. If you like." Chapter 620. Having said that, He Nanqi gave him a hard push. He Dongling hit the back of the wheelchair, and the cigarette in his hand fell to the ground. He Nanqi neatly adjusted his sleeves and said calmly, "Brother, if you really love her, I'll compete with you fairly. But you're just saying that she's easy to coax, easy to use, and too kind to take care of your feelings. Save it." When he said this, the corners of his mouth curled up, revealing a cold smile. "In the past, she was bullied because I wasn't around. Now, I'll kick anyone who bullies her in the head." He Dongling coughed. Being pushed by him wasn't light. "Nanqi, I'll say it again. She's your sister-in-law." He Nanqi looked up. Bright tenderness and fierce dominance intertwined in his eyes. "Not to mention my sister-in-law, even if she's my ancestor, I'll take her back and worship her myself." He Dongling was like a bird. Wei Wei Bai had suffered so much. He was not blind. He had been suppressing his anger for a long time. He Dongling smiled, but the corners of his mouth moved reluctantly. "Are you determined to steal my woman? But you forgot that the person she likes is still me." He Nanqi's expression turned cold. He Dongling said, "She's even willing to die for me. What right do you have to snatch her from me?" He Nanqi finally couldn't help but roll his eyes in disdain. "I love her so much that I'd rather die myself. You can even say such a bastard thing like asking her to die for you. You're so arrogant, aren't you?" He Dongling repeated, "Anyway, she likes me." He Nanqi said, "You're in the past. Useless, half-paralyzed, bastard old man." He Dongling felt that he didn't die in the car accident, but he was going to die in the hands of his younger brother. He Nanqi turned to leave and said disdainfully, "I'm going to see if Wei Wei kicked off the blanket. It's a waste of time talking to you." He Dongling, "Fuck, you're not in the right to covet your sister-in-law, are you?" Hinanchi came to the ward and saw that Wei Wei Bai was still sleeping in the same position. It was just that his calf had kicked open a corner of the blanket, revealing his bright skin. Hinanchi's mood also fluctuated at the sight of her fair skin. He gently covered her with the blanket. Suddenly, he pursed his lips and couldn't suppress the grievance in his eyes. He didn't have the slightest bit of momentum from before. "Do you really like my brother?" "I like it that much." Hinanchi's eyes were a little wet. He glanced at her beautiful side profile. "Can't you like me a little more? I'm much better than my brother." After he finished speaking, he gently picked up her hand and placed it beside his face, looking at her eagerly. "If you like mature old men, I will be very mature in the future." Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 90. In the corridor, he dongling lit another cigarette, but he didn't smoke. He just stared blankly. He thought back a lot. He found out that he was possessive of Wei Wei Bai, and that he liked her even more. It was indeed not as pure as Hinanchi. She even couldn't raise her head after being insulted by him just now. He dongling started to suspect that maybe he was really too bad to her. Ding, he slag's favorability is at 60. When Wei Wei Bai woke up, she found that Hinanchi's favorability was at 90. And he slag's favorability was only at 60. Bai Wei Wei was deeply melancholy. She was too lazy to ask why the two men's favorability had risen overnight. "Tongzi, get ready. The system, I've already prepared. I've already bought 2 pairs of panties that show off your butt. We'll each have one." "Wei Wei Bai, you wastrel, do you even need to buy these things? But then again, let's go belly dance together." Chapter 622. Her heart was as calm as water, but there was a shocked expression on her face. He dongling's smile deepened and his voice became mellow. "Wei Wei Bai, I was wrong in the past. From now on, I will pick myself up and make the company work again. I did a lot of wrong things in the past, I won't do it again. So, can you forgive me and come back to my side again?" Hinanchi made him feel a huge sense of crisis. So Wei Wei Bai was also wanted by someone. He had to quickly tighten his grip and hold on to her. Wei Wei Bai was holding her phone, her fingers were still distracted playing the game. But her eyes were filled with tears and her tone was still stubborn. "I don't love you, he dongling's eyes softened. "I know, it's enough that I love you." System, shameless, isn't this stealing the male lead's lines? Wei Wei Bai looked at the unmoving 60 favorability and despised he dongling in her heart. But she still acted. She stared blankly at her phone and then as if she had just reacted, she lightly glanced at he dongling. This glance contained all kinds of complicated emotions. In the end, she sighed, "I'm tired, he dongling, it's too tiring to love back and forth. I just want to live well." These words were filled with endless sorrow. It made people feel sad and uncomfortable when they heard it. No matter how hard he dongling's heart was, in front of Wei Wei Bai who could take a bullet for him, his heart softened. "I will try my best to make you trust me, I only ask that you give me a chance." Ding, he slag's favorability is at 65. Originally, he just wanted to make her turn back. But he didn't know when, but he dongling felt that his oath of eternal love was about to become true. Living with a woman, he almost didn't dare to imagine it in the past. But now, looking at Wei Wei Bai, he found that so many women couldn't even compare to half of her temperament. He thought it would be good to settle down. Wei Wei Bai lowered her head and did not look at him. Her back was indescribably lonely. "Let me think about it. I'm in a mess right now." He dongling didn't have time to say a lot of sweet nothings before they were stuck in his mouth. He was silent for a moment. "All right, consider it carefully. At least she still had feelings for him. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so hesitant. Wei Wei Bai stared at her phone and complained to the system, "What should I do? I'm not fast enough. I'm going to die this round." She looked at the host who had given up on herself and was already planning to belly dance. She didn't even want to conquer Scum He and only wanted to play the game. The system indicated that it should first twist its waist and learn how to dance, so that it wouldn't look bad when the time came. Wei Wei Bai suddenly said, 65 favorable impression points. Maybe we can still struggle a little. Wei Wei Bai, maybe I should open a big one. The system asked, big what? Is the host starting to get serious? Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 92. Wei Wei Bai and the system trembled at the same time. Why did Hinanchi's favorability increase again? Wei Wei Bai scrolled through Weibo and found that Hinanchi posted a picture on Weibo. The picture was of a soft and white woman's hand and a slender man's hand. Their fingers were intertwined. Wei Wei Bai saw that it was her hand at a glance. There was a sentence attached to the picture. I'll accompany you for the rest of your life. What a rustic literary style. This pretentiousness made Wei Wei Bai's teeth ache. A rustic love line moved her to the point of increasing her favorability by 2 points. Wei Wei Bai said that in the past, she had to die to increase her favorability. Hinanchi was such a simple target to increase favorability. She was in despair. Chapter 623. Wei Wei Bai opened the game again and started playing silently. The system was anxious. Didn't you want to open a big game to let he jerk increase his favorability? Wei Wei Bai, what is favorability? Strategy is not as good as dancing. Let's dance together, 65 and 92. The former increased by so much because she had to put in so much effort. The latter, she did not do anything and just went all out. Wei Wei Bai expressed that this mission could not be done. Whoever wanted to do it could do it. The system was also speechless. Then, it silently took out a pair of discount pants that it had bought and tried it. If the size was not right, it could be returned within 24 hours. In the following days, Dongling started to get busy. To get rid of the image of a useless old man. He quickly gathered all the remaining resources and started to snatch other people's resources by hook or by crook. Then, this time, he learned his lesson. He did not touch Sire Zhou. While working, he was rehabilitating and flirting with Wei Wei Bai from time to time. Dongling had never been so busy. And Wei Wei Bai, who was being flirted with, was also very busy. She was busy watching cartoons and playing games. Hinanchi did not flirt with her anymore. But even so, Hinanchi's favorability still grew to 95. And he jerk's favorability, she could flirt with him as she wished. 65, unmoved. If the two brothers' favorability could be evenly increased, everything would be fine. Dongling brought Wei Wei Bai to the company every day. After a long time, rumors of them getting back together came out. Hinanchi was very busy. He called Wei Wei Bai every day. But during this period, she did not like his Weibo. She rarely picked up his calls. Then, he heard the news that she wanted to get back together with his brother. Hinanchi pushed back a few jobs and ran straight to the company with a mask and a hood. Bai Weiwei was tired from playing the game, so she laid down and took a nap. Dongling finished reading the proposal and looked up to see her sleeping with her eyes closed. Her skin was as white as a cake. He looked at her quietly for a while. Then, he slowly pushed the wheelchair to the sofa and said softly, "Weiwei, it's time to get off work." Wei Wei Bai did not respond. She had used too much mental and physical strength during this period of time, so she was indeed tired. He Dongling propped up his chin with his hand and looked at her carefully. She was pretty. Delicate eyebrows, thick eyelashes, and skin. She was very pretty. If it wasn't for her family background, he might not have despised her so much in the first place. This was the first time he looked at her carefully. He Dongling looked and looked, his heart unconsciously stirred. A man who was used to flirting, and playful. Basically, he. Hu Lijing. To him, it was more exciting than emotional. Maybe there was a period of time when they worked well together. He Dongling thought that the little lover was not bad and could develop in the long term. But it had nothing to do with being moved. This was the first time He Dongling felt his heart open up so clearly. He was attracted by her sleeping face. He couldn't help but lower his head and get closer and closer to her lips. There was no lust, nor was it a sensory stimulation. He just wanted to touch her. Ding, He Slag's favorability is at 70. He Dongling hesitated 2 centimeters away from her lips. Her breath blew over, making him nervous for a moment. He was nervous about a kiss that he was used to. He Dongling couldn't help but laugh at himself. He was about to kiss her. The door suddenly opened. He Dongling paused and looked up. He saw Hinanchi's gloomy eyes. / to record this reading record. Chapter 624. He Dongling, who had stopped moving, moved again. Without hesitation, he kissed her in front of Hinanchi. Hinanchi's heart was torn. Before he could feel the pain, his body had already rushed out. But he was at the door and couldn't stop He Dongling's actions. He Dongling's kiss landed on Wei Bai's back of hand. Wei Bai opened her eyes and looked at He Dongling in confusion. She covered her mouth with her hand. He Dongling didn't feel awkward. Instead, he looked up naturally. "You're awake, Wei Wei." Wei Bai woke up when she heard the sound of her favorability increasing. Hinanchi had already rushed to the sofa and pushed He Dongling back into the wheelchair. Then he stood in front of the sofa and blocked Wei Bai behind him. He looked at the calm He Dongling with red eyes. It was as if he was afraid that He Dongling would come and snatch Wei Bai away. He Dongling smiled proudly. "Nanchi, aren't you busy recently? You have time to visit your brother." Wei Bai also stood up and called softly, "Nanchi." Nanchi's back tensed up and he turned to look at her. His eyes were filled with unspeakable sadness. Wei Bai's scalp tingled when he looked at her. His eyes were full of complaints. It was as if he was an abandoned stray cat or dog that came to wait for her. Hinanchi tried hard to blink and suppress the emotions in his eyes. Then he lowered his head and said, "I've been busy recently. I can't accompany you every day, so don't ignore me." This sentence was said to Wei Bai. Such an obvious attitude was no different from a confession. He Dongling frowned and saw Wei Bai's puzzled and confused eyes. He knew. Wei Bai began to doubt Hinanchi's feelings. The nervousness in his heart appeared again. After all, compared to himself, Hinanchi was indeed a better target. If he were a woman, he would also choose Hinanchi. She was young and ambitious. She was ruthless to the outside world, but she was like a little lamb to her family. Wasn't this the type of man that women liked the most? He Dongling could not be like Hinanchi. He was used to being domineering. So a calculating look flashed through his eyes and he suddenly said, "Nanchi, it must be hard for you to start over." As expected, Wei Bai looked over. He Dongling struck while the iron was hot. "If you fail this time, don't even think about stepping onto the stage for the rest of your life." Hinanchi frowned. He had a feeling that his brother had an ulterior motive for saying those words. But ever since he was young, he wasn't as smart as his brother. Many times, he would fall into his trap. What was he trying to do by saying all this? Dongling suddenly looked at Wei Wei Bai and suddenly revealed a pitiful look. So, if others find out that you like your sister-in-law, your path to stardom will be ruined. This sentence was like a nuclear bomb. It blew up the atmosphere at the scene. Hinanshi felt as if a bucket of ice water had been poured over him from head to toe. He didn't expect that the thoughts that he tried so hard to hide would be exposed by his brother like this. Wei Wei Bai frowned a little strangely at first. You like your sister-in-law? It was as if she couldn't react to who he was referring to when he called her sister-in-law. Dongling's smile became a little malicious. Yes, Wei Wei, don't you know? Nanshi told me that he likes you. He likes you so much that he would die for you. Nanshi couldn't muster up any strength. He couldn't even refute. There was only one thought in his mind. She knew that he liked her. Wei Wei Bai was silent for a moment and finally turned to look at him. Nanshi, is what your brother said true? Nanshi stiffened for a long time before staking everything on one throw. His eyes burst with an unimaginable light. Yes, I like you. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 96. Chapter 625. Just because of a disagreement, his favorability towards her increased. How could he win her over properly? Wei Wei Bai's eyes flashed with an imperceptible hesitation. She wanted to drag Hinanshi down to lower his favorability towards her. Or should she do a belly dance? After Hinanshi finished his confession, he felt that he had used up all the strength in his body and the courage of a lifetime. His heart began to beat rapidly. His face was flushed red and he looked at Wei Wei Bai, almost unable to breathe. It was as if her answer would cost him his life. Dongling couldn't help but rub his fingers. He didn't say anything, but he looked at Wei Wei Bai nervously. Wei Wei Bai seemed to have been hit with the pause button. She looked at Hinanshi blankly. Then she lowered her head, as if she couldn't face him. Nanshi, Hinanshi reacted immediately. I'm not listening. Wei Wei Bai's eyelashes fluttered a few times. There was a trace of fear and hesitation in her eyes. Finally, her lips moved. Nanshi, I'm your. Hinanshi immediately finished her words. You're the person I like. He would never allow her to say such heart-wrenching words like she was his sister-in-law. Wei Wei Bai sighed. Her tone was soft but firm. Nanshi, it's impossible between us. Hinanshi looked up. His eyes were full of panic. His lips trembled a few times. There was a sense of abandonment on his exquisite face. Misty water vapor covered his black eyes. It made him look like a stray dog that no one wanted. His voice was hoarse and choked. It was full of frailty. I don't believe you. It's fine if you don't like me. Anyway, I'll always be with you. After Hinanshi finished speaking, he suddenly reached out and grabbed her arm, trapping her in his arms. Then he raised her chin and kissed her without any hesitation. This kiss was bitter and determined. It didn't allow her to reject it. Wei Wei Bai trembled and widened her eyes. Hinanshi hugged her waist tightly, holding her in his arms. The tip of his tongue pried open her pearly white teeth, breaking into her lips and fiercely plundering her. Wei Wei Bai felt like she was going to suffocate to death. Even his nose was not working properly. He could not take in any oxygen at all. If Dongling hadn't interrupted, Hinanshi would have kissed her to death. Dongling picked up a large book beside him and slapped it hard on his back. Hinanshi's body trembled before he released Wei Wei Bai. His fair face was flushed red, and his lips were moist and glossy. His ferocious eyes were now tinged with shyness. I know you don't like me because I'm still young, but if there are no accidents, I still have at least 60 or 70 years to pursue you. Wei Wei Bai had a bad premonition. Hinanshi continued, so, Wei Wei, I'm not afraid of rejection. After all, I'm the man who will pursue you for a lifetime. Ding, Hinanshi's favorability has increased to 98. Wei Wei Bai began to doubt her life. She had rejected him. She had clearly rejected him. She had indeed rejected him. Why is her favorability still increasing? There was no separation in life and death. There was no heart-wrenching. Just like that, the favorability points rose to 98. Wei Wei Bai wondered if she could still properly pursue him. After Hinanshi let go of her, his courage finally ran out. Although he said it without any hesitation, he still felt his heart ache. He was afraid that Wei Wei Bai would say something that would make him feel uncomfortable again. He immediately said, I'm leaving first. Wei Wei, there's still a job that I can't cancel. // Chapter 626. Hinanshi felt that to support Wei Wei Bai in the future, he had to work harder. Wei Wei Bai looked haggard as she watched Hinanshi walk out of the door. He Dongling snorted coldly. This confession is simply unreliable. What love? Young people don't have any sense of responsibility. They say they love, and they say they don't love. He wasn't done yet. Hinanshi ran back, panting. He stuck his head out of the door. He said to Wei Wei Bai, oh right, my brother is bad, mean and shameless. Don't believe anything he says. He Dongling, Hinanshi dropped a bomb. And he's paralyzed. I don't think he can use his lower body, so don't marry him. He Dongling's veins popped out. Hinanshi wasn't afraid of death. He added another layer of insurance. He has bad breath, foot odor, snores, doesn't bathe, and picks his nose. He Dongling's face was as black as a pot. Hinanshi, you're asking for death, aren't you? Hinanshi pulled the mask over his face expressionlessly, then turned and ran. Anyway, as long as Wei Wei Bai hesitated and didn't marry his brother, Hinanshi was capable of doing anything. He Dongling saw Hinanshi run out. If he wasn't crippled, he would have rushed up and beat the shit out of that bastard. He heaved a sigh of relief, afraid that he would really be angered to death. Then he looked at Wei Wei Bai and was stunned. She sat on the sofa, her eyes dim and her face pale. He Dongling couldn't help but say, Wei Wei. Bai Wei Wei looked up in hindsight and forced a smile. It's nothing, I just didn't expect Nanshi to have such thoughts about me. He Dongling was about to say a few words to attack Hinanshi. Wei Wei Bai said softly, there are people who like a woman like me. He Dongling's heart was stabbed. He frowned and said, what are you saying? You're quite nice. If it was a lie to flirt in the past. Now, this sentence was the truth in He Dongling's heart. So what if she had a family background, money, and ability to work? Wei Wei Bai could leave those women behind. Life and death, rich and poor. It wasn't bullshit. Wei Wei Bai had turned them into reality. How could there not be people like her? Bai Wei Wei laughed at herself. My family is poor, I've been a hostess, I've been married, I have no education, I have no special skills, my work ability is average, I have self-awareness. He Dongling. He Dongling's lips and tongue were a little dry. These are all external appearances. Bai Wei Wei calmly said, but people look at the outside. You were in such a hurry to tell me that Nanshi likes me. Isn't it because you want me to recognize my identity and not have any delusions of being with your brother? He Dongling wanted to refute. I just wanted to let you know that his love is not reliable. Why are you so unconfident? You deserve a better person's love. Wei Wei Bai's eyes turned cold. Do you think a woman like me, who was abandoned by you, deserves a better person's love? This sentence made He Dongling silent. Bai Weiwei suddenly lowered her head. Her clean and beautiful face, her clear and incomparably cold eyes. She said softly, word by word, could it be that the better person is you? He Dongling's heart was hit hard and he lowered his head awkwardly. His fingers gripped the wheelchair armrest tightly. He Dongling was good at flirting and had seen all kinds of situations. For a moment, he couldn't say anything. He decided to get back together with her. He liked her. That was the truth. But under Weiwei Bai's cold and calm gaze, he couldn't say a single word. // save button. Chapter 627. He liked her, but how long could this last? He Dongling had no confidence in himself. Weiwei Bai saw his hesitation and couldn't help but laugh at herself. I'm so stupid, what do I expect from you? He Dongling heard this and felt like he was hit by a wave, instantly waking him up. She had him in her heart and was waiting for him to turn back. He Dongling's lips trembled. Weiwei Bai was expressionless. I'm going back, it's time for work today. After that, she turned around and left without hesitation. After walking out of the door, Weiwei Bai stood there for a while. System, what's wrong? Weiwei Bai, waiting for the favorability. Ding, He Dongling's favorability is at 75. System, Weiwei Bai smiled calmly and then walked forward. He Dongling looked at the sunset in silence and only remembered to light up a cigarette after a long time. He thought a lot and realized that he did have a special and irreplaceable affection for Weiwei Bai. He didn't know what would happen in the future, but at least for now, he really liked her. He Nanshi finished his work and was resting in the dressing room. He tiredly held his forehead with his hand. He didn't dare to make the call in the past few days. He was afraid that Weiwei Bai would refuse to pick up his call. She knew what he was thinking. Initially, he wanted to wait until he was more mature and confident before confessing his feelings. If he confessed now, he wouldn't even have a 10% chance of winning. He Nanshi sighed and still made the call. But no one picked up. He Nanshi's hope turned into disappointment. When he automatically hung up, there was only despair left in his eyes. She didn't like him. He Nanshi's eyes were sore. He blinked, afraid that he would cry and look immature. He could only hold it in. He bit his lower lip and mustered up the courage to call again. But there was still no answer. He Nanshi was not the kind of person who would back down. He transferred the voice message. Weiwei. He hesitated for a moment before repeating himself. I really like you. It doesn't matter if you don't like me. I can wait. 1 year, 10 years, a lifetime. Even if she was married, he would still wait. Until the day of his death. He Nanshi hung up the phone. His heart was filled with passionate love, but it only turned into a few words. But this was his truest thought. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door of the dressing room. He Nanshi thought it was his assistant, so he immediately got up to open the door. The door opened. A white handkerchief was pressed against his face, and the smell of anesthesia filled his nose. He Nanshi did not have time to struggle and soon lost consciousness. Weiwei Bai, who had just come out of the shower, saw a call from He Nanshi on her phone. There was also a phone message. After she finished listening, she sighed and said, Tongzi, it's rare to meet such a pure and cute target. It's easy to get favorability. If it came with that side mission from He Scum. It was as if he was here for a vacation. The system said, why don't you reply that you like it, and the favorability will be 100. Weiwei Bai said, you're not afraid of belly dancing. The system said helplessly, of course I am, it's too embarrassing. But I've already bought the pants, it's a pity not to dance. I still have a few days of life left. Bai Weiwei, in the end, what did you buy with my hard-earned life? Oh. Hinanshi was kidnapped for 3 hours. Weiwei Bai and the system only then realized. The full article is at https://www.sashu.com/. Chapter 628. Hinanshi was too easy to capture, so even the system was too lazy to monitor him. Instead, it focused on Hidongling. The male lead's life is in danger. The system frowned. Weiwei Bai, do those people want money or lives? The system opened its heavenly eye. They want money and lives. Hidongling is too anxious to get up, but he can't touch the boss-level cannon fodder, Ninth Master's resources, so he can only steal from others. With this, he naturally had more enemies. And Hinanshi was Hidongling's younger brother. Hidongling was very vigilant, so people couldn't get close to him easily. Those who had a grudge against Hidongling could only kidnap Hinanshi. Weiwei Bai thought about it and was about to call Hidongling. The phone call came. She picked up the phone. Hidongling's voice was hoarse and gloomy. Weiwei, Nanshi has been kidnapped. Weiwei Bai immediately changed her expression and said anxiously, "What's going on?" Hidongling smiled bitterly. "It's my fault. The people I offended joined forces to kidnap Nanshi. It'll probably be difficult to rescue him this time." Weiwei Bai also felt that it was troublesome. In this situation, she could only use her life points to buy some life-saving things from the system. Otherwise, Hinanshi would definitely be in trouble. Hidongling's breathing on the other end of the phone became heavy. "Weiwei, they have a request." "Weiwei Bai, how much?" Hidongling hesitated. "It's not money, it's a person's life." Weiwei Bai paused. "Your life?" Hidongling, "No, they want me to assassinate Ninth Master, then use Ninth Master's death to exchange for Nanshi's life." Weiwei Bai was at a loss. What kind of deal was this? Hidongling probably knew that Weiwei Bai didn't understand this exchange method. He explained patiently, "Ninth Master has been covering the sky with one hand for too long. He's even more hated than me. Many people can't wait for him to die. However, no one had the ability to take his life. I was the first one who had brazenly gone against him and survived, so those people treated me as cannon fodder and asked me to kill him." Hidongling was very clear. This was a dead end. If he didn't assassinate her, Nancy would die. If he did, he would be the one to die. Nanshi might not be able to be saved, and Master Zhou might not be able to kill him either. "Weiwei Bai, this kidnapping ransom is very creative." Hidongling continued, "Nanshi has been a good child since he was a child. Other than his foul mouth, he has the best temperament in the family. I plan to accept this condition." Usually, they would quarrel and poach each other. At the critical moment, they were still brothers. Hidongling could be a jerk to everyone, but he couldn't be a jerk to this younger brother whom he had watched grow up. Weiwei Bai's mind kept turning. She followed her train of thought and said, "Dongling, calm down. You can't save Nanshi like this." Hidongling said, "This is the only way. I'm here to say goodbye to you today." Weiwei Bai's tone darkened. "You don't have to go. I'll go." Hidongling thought that there was something wrong with his ears. "What?" Weiwei Bai didn't hesitate and emphasized, "I'll go." Hidongling raised his voice. "Weiwei Bai, don't joke like this." Weiwei Bai was silent for a while. "When Ninth Master let you go last time, I felt that he was interested in me. Of course, this meant that a father had feelings for his daughter. After all, she was acting according to Ninth Master's daughter's personality. It would be strange if Ninth Master didn't have any reaction. // Chapter 629. But he Dongling didn't know that. When he heard that it was interesting, he thought of the way Jiu Yi looked at Wei Wei Bai last time. His heart immediately jumped. Don't ruin yourself, Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai's indifferent voice sounded, I've been a hostess in a bar before. I've seen all kinds of things. It's not unheard of to accompany an old man and then kill him. There are many hostesses outside who marry old men and then kill them to steal their property. He Dongling's voice trembled, I don't agree. I won't let you go. Wei Wei Bai calmly said, He Dongling, you must have fallen in love with me. In the past, you were so cruel to me that you wouldn't care even if I died. He Dongling's breathing became chaotic and his words also became chaotic. Now is not the time to talk about this. Wei Wei, don't get involved in this matter. Wei Wei Bai smiled, full of helplessness. Even if you force me into a corner, I don't want you to die. She didn't just save Nanqi's life. It was also He Dongling's life. He Dongling immediately thought it through. He listened to the phone in a daze. He didn't know why, but his eyes became wet. The He family fell. He had nothing. He didn't cry even when his legs were disabled. This woman didn't want him to die at all. It made him completely unable to suppress his pain and emotions. Ding, He Slag's favorability has increased to 80. Wei Wei Bai heard the sound of the favorability increasing and directly hung up the phone. Then she went to pick a dress. It was light blue with a collar that reached her shoulders. It was a little princess dress that reached below her knees. Then she tidied up her hair. She looked at the photo of Jiu Ye's daughter and put on makeup. The system gave her the information of Jiu Ye's daughter while nagging, actually, belly dancing is also fine. You don't have to attack He Slag's favorability to attack the favorability. Wei Wei Bai really started a big game strategy. Assassinating Jiu Yi was simply a matter of minutes. Wei Wei Bai held the lipstick in her hand. I've developed an obsessive-compulsive disorder in so many worlds. If I don't complete the side mission, won't I break my undefeated record? The system said, you can even get obsessive-compulsive disorder from this. Wei Wei Bai, of course, more importantly, I saw the pants you bought. It's too ugly. I refuse to wear it. He would rather die trying to get the strategy. She would definitely not wear those leopard print pants that exposed her but in the back and had a chrysanthemum in the front. They could reflect light and had a colorful glitter effect. Wei Wei Bai looked at the information and realized that it was Ninth Master's birthday banquet tonight. All the influential people in the city were there. He Dongling also received an invitation, but because of He Nanqi's matter, he definitely didn't have time to go. Bai Wei Wei planned to go around and walk around in front of Jiu Yi. He Dongling's favorability was different from He Nanqi's. He Nanqi was the kind of person who would give back dozens of times more favorability if you gave him a good reaction. He Dongling, on the other hand, was the kind of person who needed others to do everything for him, so he would be stingy and willing to increase his favorability. The title of Scum Man, He Dongling was indeed well deserved. He Dongling knew that things were not good when he was hung up on. Wei Wei Bai wanted to assassinate Ninth Master, but how could she do it? Even if it was him, he would only be sending himself to death. He only wanted to save Nanqi, so he had no choice but to try without hesitation despite knowing that it was impossible. But why did Wei Wei Bai want to go? She would just be sacrificing herself for nothing. Chapter 630. Idiot. He Dongling was anxious and suddenly stood up. Stand up. His legs suddenly got better. If it was normal times, he Dongling might be very happy. But now, he rushed out anxiously and called the driver to stop Wei Wei Bai. Along the way, he mobilized his men to stop Wei Wei Bai. The news said that Wei Wei Bai was going to attend Master Zhou's birthday party. That old man was interested in her. Not to mention the assassination, Wei Wei Bai's face was so popular with Master Zhou. That perverted old man wouldn't do anything to her, right? He Dongling rushed to the birthday party. It was held in Master Zhou's living room. He also had an invitation, so he Dongling felt that he should be able to stop Wei Wei Bai. When he Dongling got out of the car, he saw Wei Wei Bai had just walked in. He shouted anxiously, "Wei Wei, come back." Wei Wei Bai stopped in her tracks and stood by the door. A lamp was on her head, and the light shone on her body, giving her a hazy and holy light. She smiled, and her eyes were filled with light. She was so beautiful. He Dongling only felt that his heart was beating uncontrollably and his chest hurt from the impact. His voice became hoarse. I like you, I like you." This sentence seemed to be impulsive. But at the same time, it was as if he had gone through a difficult test and should carefully make a confession. Ding, he Slag's favorability is at 85. Wei Wei Bai didn't say anything. She looked at him deeply, then turned and walked in. He Dongling trembled and immediately followed. But he Dongling was stopped at the door. He took out the invitation, but it was useless. It was as if he was deliberately stopped. He Dongling thought about it and felt a chill all over his body. Jiu Yi, that rotten old man, had indeed taken a fancy to Wei Wei Bai. He remembered what she had said. Because she had been a hostess, she didn't care even if an old man coveted her. He Dongling stood outside the door. He couldn't help but take out a cigarette, but his fingers were shaking so much that he couldn't hold it. In the end, he cursed himself, bastard. If it weren't for him, Wei Wei Bai wouldn't have been forced to this point. He Nanqi's tears finally fell from his eyes. He wept silently as he struggled to light a cigarette and smoke. His back was like a stray dog, full of despair and haggard. He finished smoking a cigarette and finally raised his head. His eyes were full of gloomy madness and the determination to stake everything on a single throw. He Dongling returned to his car. He made a call and ordered half of his men to go and rescue his brother. The other party might kill the hostage, so he did not dare to act rashly. But he Dongling couldn't care less now. He knew that Wei Wei Bai wouldn't succeed. If he didn't save her now, Wei Wei Bai's corpse would be waiting for him at dawn. Just now, he had repeated hundreds of ways for her to die in his mind. It was a heart-wrenching pain. He Dongling took out his pistol and sat in the back seat of the car. He waited for the other half of his men to come over. All these years, he couldn't bear to take out his accumulation even if the He family collapsed. It was completely exposed. But He Dongling was surprisingly calm. He wanted to save He Nanqi. He also wanted to save Wei Wei Bai. However, the matter this time had forced him into a dead end. Perhaps no one could be saved. All three of them were going to die. He Dongling still made the decision to do his best, even if he had to die. It was better to die with the person he liked than to live like a dog. Wasn't this also a kind of happiness? //